My name is Sarah, and I recently turned 30. I've been married to Joey for a year and a half. When Joey, the man I'd always wanted to marry, proposed, I was thrilled. We both looked forward to a life full of memories, love, and supporting each other. Looking back, those were truly happy times. The first signs of trouble in my marriage started about 3 months after we got married. One day, I unexpectedly received a call from my mother-in-law, Grace, asking us to visit Joey's family home. Since Joey preferred that I be a stay-at-home wife, I spent most of my time doing household chores. Grace knew this, so when she called, I agreed and headed over to her house. When I arrived, Grace was waiting at the door. I greeted her, but she didn't respond like usual. Instead, she said, "Come in quickly, there's a lot I need you to do today," and led me into the living room. Confused, I asked, "What do you need me to do?" She pointed to the kitchen sink with her chin and said, "It's full of breakfast and lunch dishes. Go wash them." I was shocked and didn't know how to respond. Grace had always been friendly and kind whenever Joey and I visited before. I hesitated, but she snapped, "Why are you just standing there? Didn't you hear me? Wash the dishes." Startled by her sudden change in attitude, I quickly replied, "Okay," and went to the kitchen. My heart was pounding. I had never seen this side of Grace. Could this be harassment? The thought sent a chill through me. Not wanting to make her angrier, I washed and put away the dishes as quickly as possible. When I was done, I said, "Grace, I've finished the dishes." Without much reaction, she replied, "Good, now do the laundry, and after that, clean the house, including the stairs." Then, she laid down on the living room sofa and fell asleep. I stood there, completely lost. I didn't know where the cleaning supplies were or how she expected me to do the laundry in her house. Nervously, I asked, "Grace?" She snapped again, "I just told you what to do. You're my son's wife. Can't you handle this? Even my daughter, who's younger than you, does this perfectly." She then fell back asleep. I was stunned and felt frozen. Why was she comparing me to my sister-in-law, Lily? Frustrated, I decided to clean the house and do the laundry anyway, even though it seemed like my efforts didn't meet her expectations. I had to redo the laundry and cleaning because Grace wasn't satisfied. She constantly said things like, "If it were Lily, she would have gotten it right. Why can't you? You're unfit to be Joey's wife if you can't even manage household chores." How embarrassing. Her complaints never stopped. It suddenly dawned on me why Grace was being so harsh. She was comparing me to her perfect daughter, Lily, and couldn't stand that I didn't measure up. Lily is Joey's sister and my sister-in-law. She got married before us and lives with her in-laws, so we rarely see her. From the little I know of her, especially from our wedding, she seemed outgoing and easy to talk to, but since we've never had a deep conversation, I can't say for sure. Grace and my father-in-law, William, always seemed to favor Lily. I remember at our wedding, William said, "Look how cute Lily is in her party dress. She's stealing the spotlight from the bride." Grace agreed, and even Lily joked, "Hey, that's rude to Sarah." Joey and I laughed it off, but it stung a little. Ever since then, Grace and William have been comparing me to Lily, and my feelings towards her have become more negative. 3 months into our marriage, I talked to Joey about Grace's behavior. I told him, "I went to your parents' house today because Grace called me. I did the chores, but she kept comparing me to Lily and complained the whole time. Can you say something to her?" Joey replied, That doesn't sound like Mom, but okay, I'll talk to her." His tone bothered me, but I hoped he would handle it. Unfortunately, it only made things worse. Grace started calling me over even more, piling on chores and even making me do major shopping for her. At first, Joey would say, "All right, I'll tell Mom," but as time went on, he started saying, "Maybe you're just being too sensitive." Eventually, whenever I brought up Grace, he would sigh and say, "Look, maybe Mom's just trying to help you. Why not take it a bit more seriously?" Can you believe it? We had only been married for about a year, and Joey was already taking his mom's side over mine. I felt a wave of emptiness wash over me, filled with anger and sadness. I had moved past those feelings and reached a state of complete indifference. From then on, whenever I visited Joey's parents' house with him, Grace began ordering me around like it was expected. It seemed like she now thought Joey was on her side, so she didn't hesitate to assign all the household chores to me. Meanwhile, William, Grace, and Joey would sit in the living room enjoying tea. Whenever we ran out of snacks, Grace would say, "Sarah, you're so inconsiderate. If you see it running low, bring some more." Even Joey joined in, saying, "Sarah, more tea, please, make it stronger this time." He had started treating me just like Grace did. William wasn't any better. He would order me around too, saying things like, "Sarah, we're out of cigarettes, go get some." I wanted to scream, "Buy your own cigarettes, Joey, Grace, make your own tea and snacks," but I felt trapped and alone, and changing my situation seemed impossible. Fast forward a year and a half into our marriage, I was once again at Joey's family home. These days, Grace would call me over on Joey's days off, and we both felt obligated to go. I was pregnant and had just entered my third trimester. I felt awful and honestly didn't want to be at Joey's family home at all. After learning about my pregnancy, Grace seemed more enthusiastic, saying, "I have so many things to teach you as a mother-to-be," but in reality, she just had me doing housework while neither Joey nor William lifted a finger to help. I was just following Grace's orders. I was experiencing periodic stomach cramps and discomfort, and I was even breaking out in cold sweats. Standing was becoming a real struggle. Despite this, Grace said, "Lily did housework even when she was pregnant. You know you're slacking off a bit, don't you?" Sure, my morning sickness hadn't been too severe, just some nausea and fatigue, but now, in my third trimester, I felt weak and struggled just to stand. Hours later, while I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, a sharp pain suddenly hit my stomach, and I crouched down. Just then, the front door opened, and I heard a loud voice call out, "We're home." It was Joey and William. I could hear them asking, "Ah, you're back, where's Mom?" It was clear that Lily had returned as footsteps approached. She walked into the kitchen and was startled to see me hunched over in pain. "What's going on, Sarah? Are you okay?" she asked, rushing over to me. I replied, "Sorry, my stomach's hurting a bit." Hearing this, Lily looked at my belly and awkwardly asked, "Sarah, could you be pregnant?" I thought Joey had told Lily since he said he would when I entered my third trimester. Suddenly, Lily began to tremble, her face turning bright red, and she stormed out of the kitchen. "Mom, where are you?" she yelled as she called for Grace. Grace, who had likely been napping upstairs, came down casually. "Oh, Lily, welcome back. I missed you," she said, trying to hug her, but Lily pushed her away. Confused, Grace asked, "What's wrong?" Lily responded coldly, "Why is Sarah cooking alone, Mom, especially when she's so visibly pregnant?" Grace suddenly realized that Lily wasn't on her side. Her face turned pale. "Well, Sarah insisted on doing it," she stammered. Lily shot back, "No way. Do you know how hard it is to be on your feet all day in the late stages of pregnancy? You've been pregnant. You should know," she yelled furiously. Grace was shocked that her beloved daughter wasn't siding with her and slumped to the floor in defeat. Ignoring Grace, Lily went to the living room, picked up a newspaper, and hit Joey on the head with it, shouting, "Who got Sarah pregnant while you sit here playing on your phone? Aren't you ashamed?" Joey stammered, Joey was too stunned to take the situation seriously. Lily shouted, "Sarah's being mistreated by Mom, and you're oblivious. Are you that clueless?" She lunged at Joey, but William intervened, saying, "Lily, calm down. Calm down? Remember when I brought my husband to meet you? You told him to prioritize and take care of me after we got married. What about this mess? Your son is playing games while his pregnant wife is left alone." William couldn't say a word and just looked down, his face turning pale. Finally, Lily yelled, "All of you, cool your heads, you inhumans," and kicked William, Grace, and Joey out of the house. The room fell silent. Suddenly, Lily seemed to remember I was there. She turned around and said, "Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry for yelling. Did I scare the baby? Are you okay?" Her strong demeanor from moments before vanished. I found her sudden change in mood so funny that I couldn't help but laugh. "What's so funny, Sarah? I'm really concerned here," she said, looking worried. "Yeah, sorry, I get it, Lily. Thanks for sticking up for me." When I actually said thank you, tears started flowing. All the pent-up emotions I had been holding back came rushing out. For someone who had felt so alone, Lily's words and actions meant the world to me. My impression of her began to improve after this incident. Seeing me cry, Lily apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry for not noticing anything wrong before, for my mom's terrible behavior, and for my embarrassing brother." But I told her, "It's not you who should be apologizing, Grace, for what she did, and William and Joey for turning a blind eye. They're also in the wrong. I'm even at fault for not seeking help sooner." I assured Lily, "Don't worry, it's all good now," and we sat down to the dinner I had prepared. Afterward, Lily drove me home. A few hours later, a likely flustered Joey returned. He had completely changed his tune, saying, "Sarah, I'm really sorry about everything, it won't happen again." When I told Lily what had happened, she said, "That's good to hear, but if anything like this happens again, don't hesitate to divorce him." Grace and William later came to our home to formally apologize, saying, "We were wrong, we're really sorry." After that, there were no more calls to come to Joey's family home, and the harassment from Grace stopped. Joey also stopped suggesting we visit his family, allowing me to relax for the rest of my pregnancy. Thanks to Lily, we started staying in touch frequently. We even had casual phone calls, chatting about various things and feeling like real friends. Once things settled down after the baby was born, I planned to visit Joey's family again. When I told Lily, she said, "Let me know when you're going. We'll plan a family visit too." It felt reassuring to have her support. From the bottom of my heart, I was glad Lily was there. I thought everything would be okay now, with Grace and with Joey. I felt confident that we could manage, and I owed this newfound confidence to Lily. If Lily ever needed help, I wanted to be there for her too. That's how I went through each day now.
Samuel wearily placed his suitcase on the table and began to unbutton his jacket. He was relieved that the long, cold, and dreary December day was finally over. The doctor was already imagining how he would go home and get under a hot shower for about 20 minutes and then drink some hot tea with ginger and lemon for a long and leisurely time. "Oh, are you back already?" Carla greeted him in a syrupy voice. Over her blue medical uniform, she had thrown a thick long shawl, a necessity given the poor heating in the small district hospital. The doctor was wary. Carla was easy to work with, not only because she was local and knew all the doctors and patients well, but also because the nurse always had everything written down properly. And now, by the guilty expression and flattering tone of her voice, it was clear that Samuel was expecting not very pleasant news. "What else is on our plate today, Carla?" he asked, in as stern a voice as he could muster. But his stern voice didn't fool the nurse. After 5 years of working together, Carla knew Samuel only feigned strict. He was genuinely kind and composed. "We have another call," she said softly, pushing a report towards him. Samuel's dark eyes lifted, nearly touching his curly hair. "No," Samuel responded firmly. "My shift ended 2 hours ago." "Dr. Creedy, please," Carla pleaded. "It's an elderly woman living alone on the outskirts of the village. Coincidentally, it's near your summer cottage. You could stop by there on your way home." "I have so much to do at home in December," Samuel replied, his voice heavy with sarcasm. However, his tone had softened, and Carla sensed she was winning. "You know, in a snowstorm like this, no ambulance can navigate our roads," she added, delivering her final argument. "Yes, I know," Samuel sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Tell me what's happened to this elderly woman of yours." Seizing the opportunity before Samuel could change his mind, Carla quickly relayed the details. "Here, I wrote it down for you. Take the main street, turn right at the store, and go all the way to the end. It's the last house with the green gate." "Yes, my cottage isn't far." "Aha," the nurse replied cheerfully, then asked, "Should I wait for you?" The doctor shook his head. "Go home, Carla. Your workday is long over. I'll stay at my summer house after the patient and come here in the morning." They said goodbye and Samuel went to the car. He hoped the old car would start despite the frost. The car grumbled, coughed, but started. The snowstorm made driving challenging, especially with the few street lamps providing minimal light. As Samuel passed the store and turned right, he thought he saw a figure on the road. Upon closer look, it was a woman. She was swaying slightly and holding a large bundle to her chest, presumably a child. Samuel slowed down. "Hey," he called through the rolled-down window. "Do you need a ride?" The woman looked frightened, but calmed when she saw Samuel. Approaching the car, Samuel noticed her nose and hands were white from the cold, protruding from the sleeves of a thin, out-of-season coat. "Do you need help?" he asked. The woman looked at him with large black eyes and suddenly nodded. Samuel shuddered. Why had he stopped in the first place? She could have been a local on her way home. Now that he knew she was in trouble, he couldn't just drive away. He fumbled in his jacket pocket, pulled out a set of keys and detached one. "Walk around this house. There's a grove behind it. It's not big. You'll pass it in about 5 minutes. After it, there's a cottage settlement. You need the second house. It's decorated with wooden carvings and with a blue roof. Don't get mixed up. Here's the key. I'll finish my job soon and join you, okay?" The woman nodded. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She held a wrapped child with one hand while accepting the key with the other. She staggered slightly, but then walked confidently in the indicated direction. "Am I a fool?" Samuel mumbled to himself. He sighed and hurried to his patient. He spent half an hour with Mrs. Wells. The elderly woman was okay. "I knew it was the blizzard, the damned," sighed the patient. "Every time the weather changes, it starts." "It happens," replied the doctor. "Have you taken your pills the last few days?" The elderly woman sighed guiltily. "I sometimes forget." "I see. I've written everything down for you. I've left a big note on the refrigerator. You can't miss it." "Thank you, Dr. Macready." The elderly lady thanked him. "May God bless you with good health, a good wife, and many children." The doctor wrinkled his nose, but didn't comment on the wish. "Your blood pressure is normal now, and your pulse is good, but if anything happens, call me." "Thank you," Mrs. Wells said to the doctor. "I'll go to bed now, and in the morning I'll be well." They said goodbye. Samuel stopped at the store on his way to the cottage. The snowstorm was getting worse, and visibility was almost zero. "I'll need to start the fireplace immediately," Samuel thought as he approached the house. He saw the light on in the windows. He looked inside and saw his new acquaintance near the bookcase. She seemed to hide a bundle in the shelves. Interesting, the man thought, and headed to the door, stomping loudly and slowly opening it. The first thing he felt in the house was warmth. His new acquaintance had managed to light the fireplace. She had also put on the kettle. "This is very convenient," said Samuel, putting a bag of groceries on the table. "I brought us some food, and I haven't been here for a while, so there's probably no food left." The woman didn't answer him. Now he could see her better. She looked more like a young girl, perhaps 18 or 20 years old. She had a youthful, thin face, dark skin, large black eyes, and matching hair, braided into a thick plait that reached her waist. But her face was mature and sad, suggesting recent grief. She hung her thin coat on a chair she'd placed next to the stove. Now she was wearing a simple long grey woolen skirt that reached mid-shin and a very light black blouse. She placed her boots near the stove, and Samuel thought that they too were not suitable for winter, like the coat. When he entered, the girl immediately rushed to the child, who was sitting in the chair, and picked him up. It seemed to be a girl. Blonde hair, dark eyes, like the girl's. She looked to be about 4 to 5 years old. "Have you warmed up?" the doctor asked. The girl nodded. Samuel sighed. Apparently, she was not very inclined to talk. "I'm going to make us dinner," he said. "I think it will take an hour. You can rest for now. Come with me, I will show you where." He led them to the far part of the house, where behind a thin partition stood a large bed. "You can lie down here for now," Samuel added, pulling out a thick down blanket. "The house hasn't warmed up completely yet, so you'll need the blanket." The girl carefully laid the little girl on the bed, took the blanket from the doctor's hands, lay down next to the child, covered them both, and looked at Samuel gratefully. "I'll call you when everything is ready," he said, and left, quietly closing the door. "Samuel, you do love to look for trouble," he thought to himself, putting a pot of water in a frying pan with oil on the stove. "Instead of living your own life, you deliberately find other sufferers to focus on them." Samuel boiled pasta, fried chicken, cut bread, sausage and cheese. He took milk and cookies out of the bag. In half an hour, everything was ready. He went to the room and opened the door, trying not to make noise. The girl immediately opened her eyes. "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you," he said. "Are you coming to dinner?" The girl nodded and stood up, gently waking the child. The little girl stretched sleepily, but obediently got up and went. She seemed to be afraid to step away from her companion, even a step, and clung to her with her whole body. All three ate greedily and hastily. Samuel himself had only had time to drink tea early in the morning and was starving, and his new acquaintances, it seemed, had not eaten for a long time either. Finally, they all drank a second cup of tea and leaned back in their chairs. "Maybe we should talk now," Samuel politely suggested. "It seems it's time." The girl smiled weakly. "Okay," she said very quietly. "I can talk a little." She gestured to her throat. "Hurts?" Samuel asked. "I'm a doctor and can take a look." The girl shook her head. "All right, I won't insist. Can you tell me your name?" The guest thought for a few seconds and then answered, "Betty." "Nice to meet you, and I'm Samuel. And this beautiful little creature?" "Sophie." The little girl, hearing her name, suddenly clung to Betty and looked at her questioningly. She soothingly stroked her blonde curly hair. "Okay," said the man. "I understand that we won't talk today. Shall we go to bed?" "Yes," Betty said quietly. Samuel nodded and added, "I will leave early for work tomorrow. It's a hospital in a neighbouring town, not too far from here. I'll try to return early. You'll stay here, right?" "Do you mind?" Betty asked, looking at him pleadingly. "No." The girl nodded. "Thank you." In the morning, Samuel nearly arrived late at work. The service car had frozen overnight and didn't want to start. Normally, Samuel took the bus to work from his city apartment. He rarely used his own car, which was parked in the garage. However, it might be more convenient to use it this weekend if, for example, Betty and her daughter needed a ride. Why am I already considering them as if they will be with me for a long period? Perhaps I'll come home tonight and they'll be gone, as if everything is at the cottage, Samuel thought. At the clinic, Samuel saw that a small queue had formed in his office. He quickly changed and entered the office. "Hello, Dr. McCready," Carla greeted him cheerfully. "How did everything go yesterday?" "Fine, I left Mrs. Wells with a blood pressure of 120/80. "That's great. Can I invite the first patient?" "Yes, I'm ready." The blizzard was still raging. It was snowing so heavily that nothing could be seen out the window except for streams of snow. The frost was also increasing, so there were few patients. 4 people with minor frostbite, another who slipped on a frozen puddle and sprained his ankle, and a person with bronchitis. "Is that all?" Dr. McCready asked Carla. "Is that not enough for you?" the girl asked in surprise. "No, God forbid," the man exclaimed. "I'm just surprised." "Well, who wants to walk in such a storm? In normal weather, it's like entertainment to visit the clinic, sit in line, chat with friends, discuss their ailments and get a prescription. Today, only those who truly need it are coming." "Oh, Carla," the doctor sighed. "I've been working with you for so many years. I never cease to be amazed by your wisdom." The nurse smiled. Indeed, Samuel had been working here for about 7 years. A failure in family life brought him to this hospital in a backwater town. It all started in his first year of medical school, where he met his future wife. Vanessa was beautiful, intelligent, bright and funny. Samuel was the opposite of her. He was handsome too, but because of his natural modesty, he was almost not noticed. Besides, the guy devoted all his free time to studying. And Vanessa managed to be everywhere at once. She excelled in her studies, took extra biology and anatomy classes, and still found time to perform at university concerts. She was a talented singer and a gracious event leader. Vanessa was friendly towards everyone, including Samuel, but he didn't stand out more than the other guys to her. In their 3rd year, Samuel and Vanessa finally became friends. They were assigned to the same department for their summer internship, and eventually Vanessa noticed Samuel. On the last day of their internship, she proposed, "Let's go out." "Are you serious?" Samuel asked. "Do you not like me?" The young man blushed. "I've liked you for a long time," he confessed. Her face was radiant. Then it settled. 3 months later, they moved in together. It was the best time in Samuel's life. He and Vanessa were inseparable, at the university and at home. They studied together for tests, colloquiums, and exams. One day, Vanessa asked, "Where do you want to go for your internship?" "I'm not sure, probably therapy. How about you?" "I'm torn between endocrinology and neurology. I want to become the best specialist in my field. I dream of working in a private clinic, giving personal consultations and delivering lectures. What about you?" "Actually, I want to be a general practitioner." Vanessa smiled. "I've always seen you as an altruist. Just remember, real work isn't as sweet and colourful as it seems." After graduation, they got married and both entered internship programs. After much consideration, Vanessa chose endocrinology, while Samuel pursued general therapy, and he started working in a public clinic. Life seemed ideal for the young doctor. He loved his work and his wife. At work he was respected and offered to stay with them after internship, and in a few years to get the position of head of the department. Samuel was ready to accept, but Vanessa opposed this decision. "It's just an ordinary public clinic," she objected. "So what? I can advance quickly in my career there." "Samuel," Vanessa approached him gently, wrapping her arms around his neck. "This isn't what we dreamed of. You're so smart and talented. You shouldn't spend your life in a shabby hospital. Is that what you've spent all these years studying for?" "Vanessa, we both want to help people. What does it matter where we do it?" "There's a big difference, Samuel. We can get a job at the Central Hospital with our characteristics and experience. Understand? It's important to me." They talked about this for a long time, and in the end, Samuel gave in to his wife. Working in the city's largest clinic was good but a bit boring. There were many doctors there, and the young doctor was not given complex patients. Samuel felt that he was not developing there, but Vanessa was in her element there and quickly and easily made friends with half the hospital. Samuel saw that Vanessa was like a fish in water, and he was ready to endure for her sake. So they worked for a while, until the day when Samuel accidentally went out to drink coffee. That day he had a lot of work, and also duty. With the number of patients and paperwork that needed to be completed, his head was spinning. He leaned back on the chair and rubbed his nose. "Are you on duty today?" Paul, his senior colleague, asked him sympathetically. "Yeah," answered Samuel. "An hour until the shift. There's no point in going home, so I'll sit here and fill out medical records." "Listen to a more experienced doctor, Samuel." Paul, who was only 33, said with a smile. "Go for a walk, breathe some fresh air, have a coffee, eat properly. Dedicate this hour to yourself, and the medical papers won't go anywhere in that hour." Samuel smiled but decided to follow his colleague's advice. He changed and left the hospital in a good mood. He walked to the nearest coffee shop, took a huge cup of coffee, a double burger, and walked back. He crossed the road and suddenly saw Vanessa in a parked car. In the other second, he realized that in the driver's seat was the head of Vanessa's department, and that they were kissing. So passionately and hotly. Vanessa had never kissed him like that. She was generally against showing feelings in public places. But here... Samuel didn't even remember how he got back to the hospital. The coffee and burger were left untouched. It was good that the duty went smoothly, because he wasn't able to concentrate on work. The next day he submitted his resignation, and in the evening he talked to his wife. He didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't make a scene. He spoke calmly and clearly. "Samuel, it's not what you think," Vanessa shouted. "Vanessa, enough," he said tiredly. "I love you, not him," she said. "I just need to make my way. Do you know how hard it is without the right connections?" "You can do whatever you think is necessary," said Samuel, "just without me." After that, Samuel got a job at a small hospital in a remote town near where he spent his childhood. The management there was simply happy and couldn't believe that a skillful doctor wanted to work for them. There were no applicants for the therapist position there, and there was a lot of work. However, Samuel was quite satisfied with this. He immersed himself in work and wasn't going to return to previous life. And now Samuel finished his shift and was on his way to his summer cottage. He only stopped by the store again, despite a feeling that there might not be anyone at the cottage. Nevertheless, he decided that provisions wouldn't hurt. However, there were lights on in the windows and smoke coming from the chimney. It had once been a house where Samuel lived with his parents and older brother during their childhood, but that was a long time ago. "I'm here," the man announced as he opened the door. Inside it was warm and clean. The floors were washed, the dust was wiped away, and there was a pleasant smell of food. "Hi," Betty said quietly and smiled shyly. Samuel noticed that she was wearing his old shirt and pants, which were much too big for her and hung loosely. Little Sophie was sitting on the floor by the fireplace, playing with a jar. She was wrapped in a huge towel. "I'm sorry," Betty said shyly, clutching the hem of the shirt. "I washed my clothes." "That's great, and I don't mind you using the clothes. They're all for the cottage anyway." The girl nodded, then gestured towards the table. "Dinner?" Samuel asked. "I'd love to. Just let me wash my hands." He placed the bags on the table and went to the bathroom. When he returned, the bags had been unpacked and plates were set on the table. "It's delicious," Samuel commented after having the meal. "I never thought such a masterpiece could be made from such simple ingredients. You have real talent." Betty smiled faintly. "Thank you." Throughout dinner, Samuel pondered over how to start a conversation. He had a woman and a small child in his house for the second day, and he knew nothing about them except their names. "I've eaten," declared little Sophie, looking at Betty. "Cartoons?" she asked, and the girl nodded in response. Betty picked her up and carried her into the room, where soon the sound of a children's program could be heard. Samuel cleared the table, placed the dishes in the sink and began to wash them. "I would have done that myself," he heard from behind. "I should have thanked you somehow for the wonderful dinner." 2 years ago, I couldn't even make scrambled eggs," she said quietly. Samuel silently looked at the sad girl and waited for her to finally start her story. Betty quickly descended the marble staircase, ignoring her father's shout. "If I hear about your antics one more time, you can forget about—" Whatever she was supposed to forget she didn't hear. She slammed the door so hard that her mother's crystal collection on the fireplace must have scattered. "Get in!" She heard her friend Gloria's loud, joyful voice from her brand-new red car. "Wow," Betty said admiringly, fastening her seatbelt. "Who gave this to you?" Gloria shook her short blonde hair. "My father. Who else?" "For what?" "For not telling my mum about his new mistress." Gloria smiled dazzlingly. "You're lucky. I've been trying to convince my mum to get a new car for 2 months now, but she thinks that my Mercedes is fine because they bought it less than a year ago. Well, it seems like I won't be seeing a new car for a long time after yesterday," Betty sighed. Gloria sympathetically asked, "Where are we going now? Let's get something to eat. You can tell me what happened." Half an hour later, Gloria parked outside a fancy restaurant. "Hey, parking is forbidden here," a passing guy shouted at her. Gloria made an obscene gesture and said with an arrogant smile, "VIP clients can do anything they want." Inside the restaurant, they were immediately led to the best table. "So tell me about yesterday," Gloria said as they ordered. Betty sighed. "It's nothing exceptional. I just threw a small party and things got a little out of hand." "A little?" Gloria asked. "True," Betty cut her off. "The neighbours were just too nasty and called the police." When the bill arrived, Betty tried to pay with her card, but the payment failed. After one more failed attempt, Gloria offered to pay with hers. Once the waitress left, she asked sympathetically, "Apparently they blocked your cards. Don't worry, my parents did it a couple of times, but it didn't last long. It's the first time. Usually my mother calms my father down and discourages him from such drastic measures," Betty replied resentfully. Gloria laughed. "Everyone has a first time when their parents block their card. I'm sure they'll quickly change their minds, but just in case, Take out some cash next time and keep it at home as an inviolable reserve. After visiting the restaurant, the friends headed to Gloria's house. They relaxed, sipped on champagne, and began to discuss the plans for the evening. Gloria suggested they stay in, watch some TV or play video games. However, Betty was adamant about going out. This day has been long and challenging enough. I need to go out. Let's hit a club we've never been to before. Gloria contacted a few acquaintances and finally, one of them suggested an interesting place. Where is this place? What's it like? Are you certain? Gloria questioned her acquaintance about the nightclub, and when she ended the call, she turned to Betty. Ben recommended that place. It's a bit far, a little grimy and dark, but interesting in its own way. That's precisely what I need tonight, Betty decisively said. Let's get ready. The club was in a semi-basement and was not easy to find. Are you sure we are at the right place? Betty asked. This is the address Ben gave me. Look, there's a sign, Gloria responded, pointing towards the entrance. The club's interior was minimalistic, with dim neon lights. Initially, Gloria and Betty felt uncomfortable. Then Gloria recognized a couple of guys, and they joined their table. After a few cocktails, Betty loosened up and laughed at the guys' jokes. She received several calls from her parents, but chose to ignore them. When her attempts to use her blocked card failed, her frustration with her parents intensified. Eventually, she noticed her increasing dizziness and decided to step outside. The chilly evening air offered a refreshing contrast. Taking a few steps away from the club, she chose to take a brief walk. She had no plans to go far, just a lap around the club. She was about 10 meters from the club entrance, and she heard footsteps behind her. Assuming it was Gloria or one of the guys catching up, she turned around, but she didn't have time to react. When she awoke, she found herself in an unfamiliar place. She had experienced memory lapses before, but this time she remembered everything. The argument with her parents, the club, stepping out for some fresh air. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she realized she was lying on a narrow, wiry bed that dug uncomfortably into her body. A thin, musty-smelling blanket was draped over her. Nearby, she could make out an old wooden table and a chair. There were no windows in sight. What had happened? How did she end up here? "Hey!" Betty shouted. "Is anyone here?" She attempted to sit up, but felt dizzy and nauseous, and the back of her head ached. Touching her head, she found something wet and sticky in her hair. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from afar. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing a towering man on the threshold. "Hello," Betty said, her heart prickling with unease. "How did I end up here?" The man appraised her. "Change your clothes," he ordered, tossing something onto the bed. He then shut the door, and Betty heard the lock click. She looked at the old faded dress he had thrown. It was so worn that even the housekeeper who cleaned her parents' house wouldn't wear it. Firmly, Betty tossed the old dress aside and pounded on the door. A few minutes later, the door clicked open again and the man reappeared. "Why haven't you changed your clothes?" "Who are you? Let me out of here now. Do you know who my father is?" He snorted. "You don't seem to understand anything yet. That's a pity. I thought you were a smart girl." Betty didn't resist for long. She realized that if she wanted to survive, she had to obey. Of course, for the first few days, her mind did not want to accept what had happened to her. It seemed impossible. How could she, a girl from a rich family whose wishes were fulfilled instantly, be here? She couldn't understand how no one had noticed her absence, or why no rescue had come. When the initial shock passed, Betty realized the gravity of the danger she was in. She tried to find out what her kidnapper wanted. Money? If so, her parents would pay any amount. She screamed about it, pounding on the door, but the man didn't care. Betty realized it wasn't money he wanted. After that, she was even more scared. However, he didn't do anything to her at first. The man seemed to enjoy her fear, and the only thing he wanted was for her to obey. And she did. Only after the man realized that the girl was broken did he let her out of the room where he was detaining her. That's when Betty began to realise where she was. She was in a large, old wooden house. The windows were boarded up, allowing little sunlight in, and the lights were always on. There was another person in the house besides her and her captor, a small, dirty, frightened girl, about 3 or 4 years old, dressed in tattered clothes. Betty wanted to ask about the child, but she was afraid of asking too many questions. She stole a glance at the man, trying to discern if the girl resembled him. His facial features seemed blurred, indeterminate. A puffy, rough face was marred by old acne scars. His skin had a strange bluish-yellow hue. He had dark circles under his eyes, a shaggy beard, and dark eyes. At first the man let her leave her room in the basement for an hour, then 2. Then, unexpected, he began leaving her in the house all day. Betty couldn't understand why. She was also confused about many other things. Why was she necessary to him? He mostly kept her in the basement, didn't converse with her, and ignored her questions. If a ransom was involved, she assumed her parents would have paid it by now. "Clean up and cook a meal," he had ordered her the first time he left her alone in the house for the entire day. Naturally, the first thing Betty did was survey her surroundings. But escape was impossible. All the windows were tightly boarded up from the outside, and the heavy door was locked from the outside. The absence of sounds like car noises or human voices led Betty to believe that the house was either in the forest or in an abandoned village. Upon realizing her escape was impossible, Betty began strategizing how to attack the man. The only weapon she found was a short, blunt knife, presumably left for cooking. There were no other sharp or heavy objects in the house. In general, the furnishings were sparse. It seemed the captor must have had other places to live, or he must have been very unpretentious. There was a kitchen with an old stove and an ancient rattling refrigerator, and a room where the man must have slept. There was only a low wooden bed there. "And where do you sleep?" Betty asked the girl, who had been trailing her like a shadow. Although annoyed, Betty felt slightly at ease having someone else around. The girl looked scared but said nothing. "Cool," Betty concluded. "You're also mentally impaired." Finding no useful tools for escape, Betty returned to the kitchen. Was she expected to cook and clean? Betty had never done such tasks. The thought of what could happen if she didn't comply made her shudder. But how could she manage these chores without any experience? Betty tried to recall what the housekeeper did. However, there was no dishwasher, no vacuum cleaner, not even a washing machine. Good thing there was a bathtub, a sink and a toilet. After a brief search, Betty found a broom, a bucket and a rag. She swept up the dust and mopped the floors. All the while the little girl watched her, gradually inching closer. "Can you talk?" Betty asked the girl, but the child only recoiled, as if she expected to be hit. Betty sighed. "Okay, we'll figure it out. What does he usually feed you?" The girl darted towards the kitchen and something creaked. Following her, Betty saw the little girl pulling a sack of potatoes from a lower cupboard. "Careful there," cautioned Betty. "You might hurt yourself." The child jumped back in fear, causing Betty to instantly regret her harsh tone. What am I to do with her? Betty wondered aloud. The girl, seemingly undeterred, retrieved a large saucepan. Apparently it must be boiled, Betty understood. She cut her fingers twice as she peeled the potatoes, slowly, clumsily and awkwardly. Then Betty set the pot on the stove, and the girl handed her a jar. "Oh, salt," Betty noted. "Do I add it now?" The girl nodded. "Well, I suppose I'll have to trust you." Betty smiled sadly, gazing at the silent, pensive Samuel. It felt like a lifetime ago. Over time she had learned to cook decent meals from a limited array of ingredients, and clean with just a rag and water, so that not a speck of dust remained. All through experience and hardship. The behaviour of her captor was unpredictable. Betty could not discern any pattern to his arrivals and departures. Sometimes he disappeared for half an hour, other times for 2 or 3 days. On his good days, he acted as if Betty and Sophie didn't exist. Betty only learned the girl's name a month ago, when the captor called her for some reason. When he was in a good mood, he would eat, instruct Betty to return to the basement, lock her there, and then go to sleep himself. Once, gathering her courage, Betty asked, "May Sophie come with me?" He simply shrugged, and from then on, Betty and the little girl spent time together in the basement. Initially, Betty hesitated to form a bond with the child, as she hadn't abandoned her hope of escaping, and didn't want to involve a small child in her plan. However, they became very close over time, and Betty conceded one day, "If I escape, I'll take you with me." Several months had passed by then, and Betty's confident when had morphed into an almost hopeless if. She had considered hundreds of escape plans, but hadn't found a feasible one yet. At times, Betty succumbed to despair, envisioning a lifetime spent in the dark old house with boarded-up windows. Sophie was the only thing that saved her. She constantly tried to think of entertaining things for Sophie. She recalled all the fairy tales she had heard from her nanny during her childhood and retold them all. She also recounted the plots of various computer games and movies. Eventually she began crafting her own stories. Most of these tales involved princesses trapped in castles or dungeons, guarded by fearsome trolls, who were eventually rescued by a brave king, or managed to escape. Sophie listened to these stories with rapt attention, her eyes glowing. During these storytelling sessions, Betty herself started to believe in their possible escape. She played hide-and-seek and other games with Sophie, despite the lack of hiding places. They even invented their own games. Over time, Sophie began to speak. Betty realized that Sophie was highly intelligent, her silence stemming likely from fear. Betty didn't want to even think about what the little girl had endured, or how she ended up in their current situation. Any time the topic came up, Sophie would withdraw into herself, and it would take a long time to bring her back out. There were also days when the man was in a bad mood, and it manifested in different ways. Sometimes he would go to his room and start talking to someone, sometimes loudly, sometimes quietly, sometimes pleadingly, almost crying, sometimes shouting and arguing. Betty would try to take Sophie and hide in the basement during these moments. The man usually didn't bother them there, but sometimes he would rampage through the house like a wild animal looking for them, and hearing his approaching footsteps, Betty's heart would pound like mad. She remembers how during one such episode he roughly grabbed her by the chin and stared intently and for a long time into her face, as if trying to find something in it. It was terrifying to look at him, red, mad eyes, face flushed with blood, hair dishevelled. "Not you!" he yelled furiously, pushing Betty away from him. Then he ran out of the basement, and Betty and Sophie listened for several more hours as he argued with someone unintelligibly and tossed furniture around. Such episodes did not happen frequently, once a month, but they were frightening and therefore unpredictable. For example, once he came down to the basement when the girls were already asleep. Betty heard his footsteps and the creaking of the unlocking door. She tensed with fear, but the man was moving carefully, as if he was afraid to scare them, and Betty decided to pretend that she was sleeping. The man came to their bed and suddenly, gently, almost imperceptibly, stroked Betty's head. He was whispering something, but it was impossible to make out a single word. Betty felt as if her wildly beating heart could be heard throughout the room, but she stubbornly pretended to be asleep. The man stood there for a few more minutes, then left, remembering to lock the door. After such episodes, he would become more sluggish and indifferent than usual for several days. One day, Betty decided to try to take advantage of this. At breakfast, she addressed the man. "We need fresh air," she said, "especially the little girl. She might develop rickets. It's dangerous." The man looked at her tiredly but said nothing. After breakfast, he brought 2 coats from somewhere, an adult and a children's. Betty didn't ask. She dressed Sophie and her. The clothes were old but clean. "If any of you make a sound," said the man. His look was more eloquent than words. "We understand," Betty replied. Fear made her throat dry, but she was happy because they would go out into the sun for the first time in several months. The man unlocked the door and gestured for Betty to go ahead. She took Sophie by the hand and went, but at the exit, the man grabbed the little girl's hand and pulled her to him. "He figured out that I've attached myself to her, and I won't run away alone," Betty understood. However, she immediately realized the futility of such an idea. The house was surrounded by a high wooden fence, and the gate was locked. Suppose there was a way to find a suitable place and climb over the fence, even with Sophie in her arms. But where to go next? Betty listened. It was quiet. No cars, no people, no barking dogs, no crowing roosters, no mooing cows. In several places beyond the fence, trees were visible. Betty decided to remember this just in case. "No one lives around here," the man suddenly said. "Just us." Betty looked back. He was watching her so attentively and intently, as if he could read all her thoughts. It made her uncomfortable. "Even if you scream at the top of your lungs, right now no one will hear you. The nearest populated area is 10 kilometers away," the man continued. "Is that so? So he must have a car to get there," Betty thought. "But where is it?" She pretended not to be interested in this. Instead, Betty smiled at Sophie and said in a slightly trembling voice, "Let's gather some beautiful leaves, and at home I'll show you how to make a herbarium." The man hesitated, but let go of the girl's hand, who joyfully gathered a bunch of leaves, apparently from a tree that grew on the other side of the fence. Betty slowly followed her, trying not to betray that she was trying to look around. The plot was small, and it seemed she understood where the car was. There was a small old garage on the plot, and its gates were also locked with a padlock. Then another thought came to Betty. A phone! The man must have one. She never heard him make a call from home. Does he leave it in the car or put it on mute? I need to try to figure this out. And where does he keep all the keys? In his clothes? If he ever forgot to lock the basement door, I could try to get the keys and run away with Sophie. But what would he do to us if he woke up at that moment? Betty was even afraid to think about it. Sophie came up to her, handed a handful of leaves. Betty smiled. "That's enough for today," the man shouted. "Let's go home." Betty felt like a dog that the owner had taken out for a walk to do its business, and now he was calling her back. Clenching her teeth, she gently took Sophie by the hand and led her to the house. Betty stopped her story and pointed to her throat, which was very sore from talking. "I can take a look at your throat," said Samuel. Betty shook her head as if frightened of something. "Okay, I'll go to town tomorrow, get a couple of medicines to make it easier." "Thank you for not asking me to tell everything at once and for your help." Samuel shrugged. "Anybody would have done the same in my place." "Not everyone," Betty said quietly. The Saturday morning bus to the town was almost empty. Except for the doctor, there were a couple of elderly women in it. All the way, Samuel tried to figure out what was happening to him, why he suddenly became a caring nanny for two unknown girls. In the city, the first thing he did was visit his apartment. Of course, everything was covered in dust, flowers wilted, milk in the refrigerator had soured. Samuel packed some of his own things because he decided to live at the cottage for some time. After home, Samuel went to the supermarket, and having bought several bags of things there, he finally went to the cottage. It was nice to see the familiar smoke from the chimney. When Samuel entered the house, little Sophie jumped to him and hugged his legs. "Hello," Samuel said affectionately. "Did you miss me?" The little girl raised her head, looked at him with big serious eyes and nodded. "She was afraid you wouldn't come," said Betty. She stood by the stove and stirred something in a pot. "Sorry for being late," said Samuel. "Had many errands." He put the bags on the table and started unpacking them. "This is for you." He handed one of the bags to Betty. "You can check it in the room with Sophie." Betty looked inside and raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Clothes?" "Yes, I hope I guessed the sizes. Also, there are throat lozenges." Betty took Sophie and led her into the room. When Samuel put all the groceries away, they returned in new outfits. "Thank you," said Betty. "Thank you," Sophie beamed, came up to him and hugged him again. The girls didn't say anything else, so Samuel nodded and asked, "Let's have dinner then." After dinner, Betty washed the dishes, and Samuel stole glances at her, wondering in astonishment. Could her story really be true? She is so skillful and easygoing as she cleans the table and washes dishes, and she doesn't look unhappy or upset. There is nothing about her as a spoiled rich girl. The medicine that Samuel brought helped. Betty was already finding it easier to speak. After a few days, she could talk for longer. Their life somehow quietly settled down. Perhaps it was her psyche that worked this way, not letting too strong emotions out. But Betty seemed to calmly blend into this new life. In the morning she got up early, out of habit, formed over a year, prepared breakfast, even though Samuel told her every day that it was not necessary, that he could take care of himself. But Betty couldn't stop doing it. Maybe it had really become some kind of reflex for her. Breakfast meant safety, absence of punishment, or maybe she just wanted to thank the person who saved them. Then the doctor left for work. Betty cleaned up the table and sat down to read a book. After a couple of hours, Sophie woke up. Betty washed her, fed her, and then they did something together. They read books, watched cartoons, prepared lunch, cleaned the house. In the evening, Samuel returned. Almost every day, he brought them something: food, toys, books. "Don't spend too much," Betty once asked him. "We have everything we need." "Don't worry, I have money. I don't have anyone else to spend it on, and Sophie is happy." That was the truth. The little girl looked at the candy, yogurt, ordinary doll with amazement and delight. Betty understood how all this was wonderful for Sophie. The girl probably saw only pancakes and some kind of cookie in her life. That's all that Betty could come up with, from milk, flour, eggs and sugar. Now Betty herself was happy, looking at ordinary products: sausage, cheese, cereals, apples. And she was surprised, realizing that just over a year ago, she wouldn't have even looked at any of these products. How everything has changed. Then one evening, Betty continued her story. The months passed, and Betty had less and less hope of escaping. Periodically, she would fall into a strange state of desperation and not notice what was happening around her. And only the little girl made her come to her senses. Betty was distracted while playing with her or telling her something, but then fell back into indifference. Why should I live? Why is to fight if there is no hope of escape? And what if no one has been looking for me for a long time? What if my parents decided that it's just another of my antics and I ran away of my own free will? The only entertainment for Betty and Sophie were walks in the fresh air, but the man took them out not every day and at different times. Sometimes he wouldn't let them out of the house for weeks, and sometimes they went out every morning for a whole week, but only for 15 minutes at most. Once, Betty sat and thought about how much their lifestyle was affecting their health. Their diet mainly consisted of potatoes, pasta, cereals from various grains, bread, cabbage. For meat, they had cheap sausages, sometimes cutlets and chicken. Betty saw that her skin had become dry. Her hair was constantly falling out. She looked at her nails and smiled, thinking about what her mother or Gloria would say if they saw her in such a state. But you can't make a beauty out of a piece of soap. But most of all, Betty felt sorry for Sophie. She's just a child. She probably thinks that the world consists of an old dark cage and a few meters of grass to the fence. Her body was just forming. They should have eaten more vegetables, fruit, and been in the sun more often than once every 3 days for 15 minutes. Autumn soon came. It was cold to sleep in the basement, and Betty asked the man for another blanket, but apparently he was not in the right mood and ignored the request. Therefore, every night the girls slept close together to keep warm, and sometimes Betty told Sophie stories. Far, far from here, Betty began, "there is a magical country. The king of this country had 2 daughters. They were called Princess Rose and Princess Lily." "Were they beautiful?" Sophie interrupted. "Very," said Betty, stroking the girl's head. "The sisters loved each other very much and were pleased in the palace. They walked in the beautiful garden, ate sweet, tasty fruits, swung on swings and rode unicorns. But one day a wicked giant saw the girls. He waited until the king and the royal guards were distracted and stole the girls, and he took them to his cave. There he hid the sisters." "Why did he do this?" Sophie suddenly asked. "I wish I knew myself," thought Betty. Aloud, she said, "The giant wanted the girls to entertain him with their songs and dances. He locked them in a damp dungeon, fed them terribly, and made them work a lot. The giant thought that the princesses would soon forget who they really were and stay with him forever. But the girls remembered their father, the castle, the magic garden, and really wanted to return home. One day, when the giant was asleep, they sneaked up to him and stole the keys." At that moment, Sophie gave a joyful gasp, and Betty's heart clenched. She had told plenty of versions of this fairy tale, but Sophie was delighted every time, as if it were the first. "The girls opened the doors and ran out of the cave," Betty continued. "The giant woke up, noticed that the captives were gone, and started the chase. He chased the princesses for 3 days and nights. The girls ran across the field, climbed over the mountain, and the giant followed. They went through the dark, gloomy forest, but he did not lag. And when the girls were already exhausted, the royal palace appeared in front of them. The guard saw them, rushed up, and dealt with the giant." Betty looked at Sophie and saw that she was already asleep. She held Sophie tighter and was about to fall asleep herself when her gaze stopped on the radiator. It was rusty and old and hardly heated, but Betty had an idea of how it could be useful to them. A whole month had passed since Betty told Sophie the fairy tale about the sisters, princesses and the giant. It was already freezing outside. They now only went out for a couple of minutes. The man did not provide winter clothes, and it was freezing in the autumn ones. He did eventually give them a second blanket. It got a bit better. But the best thing was that Betty finally had a plan of escape. She had been sitting here for over a year, and all this time she could not think of anything. And here, just one thought popped into her head, and from it, ideas started lining up, one after the other, like a chain. The main thing was that their overseer did not suspect anything ahead of time. So Betty behaved just perfectly. She cleaned meticulously, cooked the best she could think of from the products they had. The bad thing was that now the man did not leave them as often and for a long time as in the summer. But the good thing was that his departures became regular. He was home for 2 days, then he left, returning only in the afternoon or the following day. Probably got a new job, Betty thought. He's unlikely to work somewhere permanently and in a good position, most likely a security guard of some warehouse. Now everything could be planned properly. Betty used every absence of the man to work out her plan. Finally the day came. The man came back tired. The bags under his eyes were even bigger than usual, and his face was pale yellow. "Give me the food," said the man angrily. Betty tried to serve the table as slowly as possible. He even yelled at her a couple of times. Betty flinched but said nothing. When she noticed how Sophie was shaking, she sat next to her and reassuringly squeezed her hand under the table. The little girl calmed down. They also ate slowly. The man had already finished, and Betty had barely managed half a portion. He sighed, but apparently he had no more energy to yell. After Betty washed the dishes, the man got up from the table. The girls obediently headed towards the basement. They went inside. He was about to close the door when suddenly Betty shouted, "Oh, there's water in here!" "What water?" the man said angrily and went inside. The girl was right. The entire floor was covered in water. The bed was flooded. Even the 2 lower steps were submerged. The kidnapper cursed and ran for tools. It took him some more time to shut off the water. Then he found boots, went down and checked the radiator. How did it manage to burst? What an old rusty piece of junk. He turned to Betty. Bring a bucket, we need to scoop out the water. Betty obediently went and began to carry water. It was clear that there was a lot of work here until morning. Okay, you'll finish it tomorrow during the day, said the man after half an hour. Maybe it will drain itself overnight. You can sleep in the house tonight. Betty nodded without raising her eyes, so that the man would not understand that she had been aiming for this. It was difficult to break the radiator. Fortunately, it was indeed old and rusted, and after a long search, Betty found a weak spot. The blanket and pillow had not had time to get wet. Betty took them and laid them on a small mattress, which Sophie had been sleeping on before. There was little space, the mattress was thin, but comfort was of little concern to Betty today. She turned around, hugged Sophie to herself. Sleep, said Betty. The girl buried her face in her side and obediently closed her eyes. Betty was sure that the man would be checking if they were asleep. So it happened. After half an hour, he looked into the room. Betty breathed calmly and evenly, like Sophie, although she was sure that the little one was also not sleeping. The man went back to his room. For some more time it was audible, as he was muttering something, walking from corner to corner. Then the squeak of the bed was heard and everything fell silent. Just to be certain, Betty waited another hour, carefully got up. Sophie immediately opened her eyes and looked at her. Betty put her finger to her lips. The girl nodded. What a smart girl you are, thought Betty. She carefully left the room. Good that a light bulb was on in the corridor, very dim but enough for her. First of all, Betty took their clothes with Sophie. If something doesn't go according to plan and they have to run away without warm clothes, it will have sorrowful consequences for them in December. Betty dressed first, then took care of Sophie. The girl was silent. Aren't you afraid? Betty quietly asked her. I'm not afraid of anything with you, answered the girl. Betty nodded, feeling how tears almost welled up in her eyes. I have to make it. I simply cannot let Sophie down. She left the girl at the front door and quietly slipped into the man's room. The light from the hallway bulb barely penetrated here. Betty was navigating more from her memory. She had found out that he kept the keys in his jacket pocket. The jacket was hung on a nail above his bed. Betty froze and listened. The man's breathing was quiet and steady. She carefully leaned over him and reached out to the jacket. She covered the pockets with her palms and began to feel through it. There was something heavy in the right pocket. Slowly, trying to keep the keys from jingling, Betty pulled out the heavy keychain. She left the room. Sophie was still standing near the door. Betty began to examine the keychain. In the dim light of the bulb, she remembered that the key the man used to lock the door was yellow. There was only one like it. The door opened almost noiselessly. Betty let Sophie out, then slipped out herself and closed the door. It was probably not that late, but they always went to bed early, especially in winter. The moon was already shining through the clouds. Well, that's a good sign, thought Betty. She ran to the gate. It took longer to find the right key here. Betty swung the gates open and rushed to the garage. It seemed she had to fiddle with the third lock the longest. Finally, the garage was also open. There we go, said Betty. She grabbed Sophie, put her in the front seat and buckled her up. She was about to get in behind the girl when someone grabbed her by the hair and yanked her back. Betty screamed. Vile wretch! The man yelled. Do you want to run away from me again? Again? Betty thought in surprise. The man was dragging her back, tightly gripping her throat with his fingers. Betty fought back as best she could, but their strength was not comparable. She could hear Sophie crying in the car and realized with horror that if she didn't do something now, they wouldn't get a second chance. The man dragged her into the house and pushed her towards the basement. You're sleeping there tonight, he yelled. If you freeze and catch pneumonia, that's your problem." The man loosened his grip for just a second, but it was enough for Betty. With all her might, she hit him over the head with a tool, not even realizing where she got the strength. The man slumped to the floor, and a trickle of blood ran down his forehead. He didn't pass out, and Betty realized that she only had a few seconds. She ran out of the house and slammed the door. With trembling hands, she pulled the keys out of her coat pocket and locked the door from the outside. It occurred to her that he might have hidden a spare set of keys in the house for such occasions, but she still bought a little more time. She ran to the garage, jumped into the front seat, and hugged the sobbing Sophie. "Shh, my sunshine," she croaked, only now realizing how tightly the man had been squeezing her throat. Betty had no more strength to speak, and she focused on the car. She managed to start it and drove out of the garage. She hadn't driven for over a year, but now her hands seemed to remember what to do on their own. Beyond the gates, she finally saw other houses. It seemed the man hadn't lied to them. There were no lights anywhere, making the village seem dead. There was only one road leading out of the village, and that's the way they drove. Betty was afraid to drive fast, but she wanted to get away from there as soon as possible. The road was dirt, completely covered with snow, and the car kept bouncing on invisible bumps. The snowstorm was getting stronger, and Betty was afraid that she could crash or run off the road. "Well, no," she said aloud, addressing either Sophie or herself. "We're not going to die that stupidly." The road was absolutely empty, not a single car or sign. At some point, they drove onto a highway. There, the occasional lights of other cars started to flicker. Betty breathed a sigh of relief. "We've escaped! Now we need to try to get to the city, but which one?" She didn't know where or how far from the club she was taken. Maybe she was thousands of kilometers away from home. All of a sudden, something under the hood went haywire, and the car stopped. Betty tried several times to start it, to no avail. Annoyingly, no one was driving on the highway at that moment. Where did they all go when we needed them so badly? Where did they all go when we needed them so badly? Betty sighed. She got out and looked around. In the distance behind, the forest, lights were visible. It seemed like there was some settlement. There were no other options. Betty pulled Sophie out of the car, picked her up and went straight through the forest. She herself didn't know how long they walked. At first it was cold, and then their hands and feet stopped feeling. Several times the girl wanted to give up. She imagined how she would lie down in this soft, warm, fluffy snow and be covered with its white down comforter. But she stubbornly moved her legs and didn't even notice at what point they came out of the forest onto the street. And then a car stopped near them. And you already know the rest. Betty finished with a sad smile. Samuel looked at her with a mixture of horror and admiration. "Poor girls," he finally said. "What you've been through." He couldn't say anything for a long time, imagining himself in their place. Probably he would have given up long ago, if he was locked in a basement, or if he was caught during the escape, or if he was trudging through the forest. But they didn't. "Betty," Samuel said, "why haven't you asked me to contact your parents yet? They don't know you're alive." The girl smiled sadly. "It's not that simple, Samuel. I'm not sure if they want to see me." "What are you talking about? They're your parents." She sadly looked at him with her big black eyes. "We had a difficult relationship. I understand it's hard for you to believe this now, but I grew up in a very wealthy family. I was the only child, who was spoiled, who didn't know the word no. I did everything I wanted, even in elementary school. I could swear at the teachers, do nasty things to classmates. I stole my dad's car at 13, crashed it. He paid a large sum to hush up the case. At 14, I started drinking and smoking. At 15, going to clubs and dating boys. Of course, Mum and Dad tried to forbid it. We often quarrelled. Sometimes they locked me in the room, took away the phone, but eventually everything was as I wanted. I somehow graduated from school. My dad just paid the principal. Then the money helped me get into university. I got an apartment and a car. Do you think I became more mature? Smarter? No, everything only got worse. I went to study when there was nothing else to do. Otherwise, I spent my dad's money, threw parties and raced in cars. Several times I was detained by the police. My father bailed me out. During one of my parties, my apartment was literally smashed, and the neighbours again called the police. Here, the patience of my parents ended. We had a serious quarrel. My father said that he would leave me without money, because only then would I have a chance to grow up and become a person. I replied something about that I did not ask them to give birth to me, and since they did, let them now reconcile with what they raised. My father said in response that he and Mum thought long ago about terminating the pregnancy, and it seems made the wrong decision. Then I shouted that I hoped for his death in a car accident as soon as possible, because I would like to be a rich heiress. After these words, my father shouted that I was no longer the daughter to him. Betty fell silent, snuffled. Samuel handed her a pack of tissues. She nodded gratefully, wiped her eyes, blew her nose, and continued. Yes, the last thing I said to my parents was that I wished them death, and I really deserved that they didn't consider me as their daughter. So I don't know if I'm ready to contact them. Betty hesitated, then added, I'm sure you know my parents, at least my father for sure. She walked to the bookcase and reached inside. Samuel suddenly remembered how on the first day he saw through the window that Betty was hiding something there. The girl handed him some old newspaper. I found it when I was looking for something to heat the stove, she explained. The first page had an article about the disappearance of the daughter of a famous businessman. Seeing the last name, Samuel whistled. So that's who your father is? Betty bitterly smiled. Yeah, I don't really look like the daughter of such a person right now. Samuel sighed. I also had not simple relationships with my father. Mum left us when my brother was 12 and I was 9. We lived in this house back then. It seemed that everything was fine, and then she suddenly leaves a note to her father that she can't do it anymore and leaves for another country. Probably he has hated all women since then. He didn't abandon us, raised us, but for some reason always loved only the older brother. Maybe because Mum loved me, I don't know. John was always his good boy. He went to law school, and I to medical. He opened his own business, and I am just a doctor in a clinic. Furthermore, he has 2 children, and I divorced. I tried so many years to live up to his expectations. I thought, a little more and Dad will understand, appreciate what a good, smart, wonderful son I am. Betty carefully placed her palm on Samuel's forearm and stroked it. He nodded gratefully. We rarely talk to him and hardly see each other, but I have a great relationship with my brother and his family. I don't know what to advise you about parents. Probably only that you can try to reach them out. At least you will not suffer from uncertainty and put an end to it. I'll think about it, and since we have a night of revelations, can I ask you something personal? Samuel smiled. Of course, ask. Why are you fussing with us? Don't think I'm not truly grateful to you. It's just fate that we met you with Sophie, but we are completely strangers to you. You could just let us warm up and spend the night, and that would be more than enough. But you drive us away. You feed us by clothes and toys. Samuel just shrugged his shoulders. What can I say? Probably it is just my essence. Helping others has always been in my blood, so I became a doctor. This is what I cannot change in myself. Thank you. You are an excellent person. I wanted to ask something else, Samuel said thoughtfully. Why don't you go to the police? Betty sighed, hesitated a little, but answered, Because of Sophie. I don't know who she is and where she came from. My worst assumption is that she is the kidnapper's daughter. She didn't tell you this? She either doesn't remember or doesn't want to talk. I'm afraid they'll take her away from me, send her to an orphanage. How will she be there without me? Besides, I don't know where the kidnapper is now. Do you think he could get out of the house? For sure. He could hide another set of keys at home. He could break the lock, break the window and tear off the boards. Could call on the phone and call for help. I don't even know if he had a phone. Are you afraid that he will find you? Betty nodded. The car abandoned on the highway must have been found long ago. Then he knows where it was left and can guess where to look for us. Maybe someone picked you up on the road and took you to the city, or you've already gone to the police. How can he know for sure? There are many options. I'm sure he won't poke around here. In any case, you can live with me for as long as you want. And I, if you don't mind, will consult my brother. He is a lawyer. The girl nodded, and the next day Samuel visited his brother. John, I need your help. Tell me, what happened to you? That's the point, it's not about me. Samuel was talking for a long time. John listened with increasing surprise, did not interrupt, only occasionally asked clarifying questions. Well, you have really heated things up, he said admiringly when Samuel finished the story. So we think he's a quiet one, sits in the remote hospital, works as a rural doctor, and he's here saving girls. Samuel sighed. I'm not saving anyone, just trying to help, so let's get to the point. John immediately straightened up, became collected and serious. Of course, I will bring the right people, but I think everything can be arranged. He will put Betty and the girl in some rehabilitation centre. They will not need to be separated there. Or do you want them to live with you? Yes. Interesting. Okay, we'll think of something. As for the kidnapper, it's a pity, of course. She didn't go to the police immediately. I think they would have caught him right away. But now it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. And I have a better idea. Let's go to your place. I'll meet your girls in person and we'll talk and decide how to proceed. Betty decided to bake a pie, found a huge jar of apricot jam in the fridge, and thought it would be good to use it. She was in a great mood. Sophie was watching some cartoon in the room. I'm making a pie, Betty told her. Do you want to join me? The girl shook her head negatively, not taking her eyes off the screen. Betty smiled and closed the door. Before, Sophie wouldn't have left her inside, but now she was no longer afraid to stay alone in the room. Betty returned to the kitchen and began to knead the dough. She was waiting for Samuel to return and preparing to call her parents and, of course, to report to the police. Now she was ready to survive a meeting with her father and mother. Even if they said they didn't want to see her any more, let it be. But the thought of parting with Sophie, the mere thought of the girl being taken away from her, made Betty feel bad. But she understood that it was inevitable. After all, they couldn't live forever in the cottage at Samuel's expense. No matter how kind he was, there is a limit to everything. The front door behind creaked. Betty smiled and wanted to say something, but suddenly she was grabbed by the neck. You thought I wouldn't find you, a familiar voice said. Betty went cold. You thought you could run away from me, the kidnapper continued. Didn't work then, won't work now. He dragged her to the door. Betty hardly resisted. The main thing is that Sophie didn't hear anything. He didn't remember about her. Maybe there's a chance he'll only take me. Samuel should be back soon. He will understand, guess what happened to me and call the police. There's a chance they'll find us by following the hot trail. The main thing is that Sophie doesn't have to go through this again. The man was dragging Betty across the yard, seemingly towards a car. He was mumbling something, but the words were indistinguishable. He tightened his grip on her throat so much that she started seeing colourful spots before her eyes. Her legs began to tangle, and she barely realised that she was being shoved into the back seat of a car. The last thing she heard was the desperate screech of brakes. When Betty came to, even before opening her eyes, she remembered what had happened. She prepared herself to see the familiar ceiling of a damp basement. Suddenly, the most dear child's voice in the world rang out next to her. Betty! Sophie is here too, so he took her as well. Betty opened her eyes and was surprised to see that she was in the same bedroom where she had been sleeping the last few days. Beside her stood Sophie and Samuel. Finally! The man sighed in relief and took her wrist. He paused for a few seconds. Pulse is normal. How do you feel?" Betty shrugged. "I'm well. Just my throat hurts again." "That's fixable. The main thing is that we made it in time." Betty tried to smile. At that moment another man entered. He looked very much like Samuel, only he looked a bit older and was broader in the shoulders. "Ah, our brave princess has woken up," he said joyfully. "I told you everything would be fine." The last sentence was directed at Sophie, who was smiling happily. "What happened? Where is he?" asked Betty and sat up sharply on the bed. "We made it in time," Samuel answered. "He's immobilized and waiting for the police. So you can breathe freely. The worst is definitely over." A year later. Betty had just set the last plate on the table when the front door opened and Samuel's elder brother's whole family bustled in. "Merry Christmas," John immediately shouted with a smile. "Where's my little niece? Why isn't she meeting me?" "I'm here," came from somewhere deep inside the house, and a happy Sophie entered a second later. In one leap she flew into John's arms, and he even grunted from the surprise, but managed to hold the girl. After everyone hugged and said hello, the children ran upstairs, and the adults went for coffee. "So, any news?" John asked. "It's been a long time since we last saw you." "Betty has finished processing the adoption papers for Sophie," said Samuel. "Oh, finally! We need to celebrate this immediately," John said, and in the next second he opened a bottle of champagne, popping the cork into the ceiling. The women shrieked. Lucille gave her husband a playful slap, but immediately held out the glasses. John deftly filled them. "I also went with Sophie to see my parents," Betty said a bit quieter. "How did it go?" Lucille asked seriously. "Surprisingly well," Betty answered. "Sometimes it seems to me that they still haven't gotten used to the fact that I came back and changed so much. Sometimes they look at me and it's unclear if they're sure I'm their daughter." "It's very good that you made up," John said. "It's all thanks to Samuel," Betty said and looked tenderly at her fiancé. "He persuaded me." Samuel blushed slightly and shrugged. In any case, it was worth trying. Sophie should have grandparents. "And what about him?" Lucille asked. Betty smiled maliciously. "We were promised that he will never be free." "Oh, well, we definitely need to drink to that, and then to move on to some lighter topic," John said. "Well then, I want to say a toast," said Samuel and turned to Betty. "I could say that the last few years have been difficult for me, but knowing what you've been through, I can't say that. Yes, they certainly weren't happy. I felt like I was existing on autopilot, until one moment I met you and Sophie. From that very moment I came alive. I don't know whether it was fate that brought us together, or something else. All I can say is, right now, I'm happy, and I want to be with you always." Betty wiped away a tear and raised her glass. She would have liked to say something, but because of the excitement and the joy that overwhelmed her, she couldn't. "Oh, guys," John said, "even me, an old man, you brought to tears. What can I say? Merry Christmas, and happy years together." It is very difficult for a successful and beautiful girl to find a worthy life partner. The question is especially complicated if the girl, in addition to her own merits, is the sole heiress of a huge capital. It almost seems like an impossible mission. Polly has always been a daddy's girl, and her bond with her father grew even stronger after her mother passed away during her student years, after a long and debilitating illness. The father and daughter supported each other through her treatment, and even more so after her passing. They formed a tight-knit unit, not allowing anyone else into their world. After a few years, Mr. Matthews, Polly's father, was tired of his monastic lifestyle and decided to find a life partner. There were some women, but none of them appealed to Polly. It wasn't just jealousy on her part. The truth was that these girls were young, foolish, and only interested in money. But Mr. Matthews understood their motives and totally admitted them. After a series of relationships, he finally chose one, Kirsten, whom he decided to marry. Mr. Matthews, being wise, signed a prenuptial agreement with his wife. Seeing her father manage his love life maturely and responsibly, without going crazy from elderly infatuation, Polly stopped worrying and accepted her father's choice. Deep down, though, she strongly disapproved, but she knew that her father deserved happiness, and if he found it with this girl, then so be it. By this time, Polly herself had become actively involved in her personal life. Initially, potential suitors fell into two categories: those who genuinely liked Polly, but were afraid of her strong character, ambition, and sense of responsibility, and those who were fearless and only interested in her financial situation. Both options were unacceptable to a sensible person like Polly. The girl was deeply upset for a long time, but eventually she gave up and stopped thinking about it, hoping that fate would intervene. And indeed, a chance played a significant role in Polly's personal life. Just a few months after deciding to focus entirely on her career, a fateful encounter occurred. One evening, a colleague from work invited Polly to her bachelorette party. It would have been awkward to decline, so Polly reluctantly agreed, planning to leave after a few hours with a plausible excuse. But the chosen restaurant had live music. The musicians, a small orchestra, played exceptionally well, but it was the saxophonist who captured Polly's heart. He was incredibly attractive and played with such improvisation that Polly couldn't help but be enchanted. Sensing Polly's attraction, the saxophonist announced from the stage that the next composition would be dedicated to the most beautiful girl in the city. It was a compliment no woman could resist, and Polly was no exception. The evening continued with a gallant invitation to dance and a gift of an expensive bottle of champagne sent to Polly's table. This is how Polly's romantic relationship with Albert began. No one anticipated anything serious. However, their relationship not only continued, but also gradually developed. After about 6 months, they decided to live together, and on the anniversary of their meeting, Albert proposed to Polly. Mr. Matthews, to put it mildly, was not happy with his daughter's choice. He believed that a third-rate musician from a tavern could never match his daughter. But Polly stood up for her choice, especially since her father himself was married to a woman from the provinces. "Fine," Mr. Matthews conceded, "but this marriage will be subject to the same terms as mine. In the event of divorce, or God forbid your death, your husband will only receive a small portion of your inheritance." "Of course, I have already written a will in your favour, and as a backup heir. The city's charitable organisations have been included. And of course, we will have a prenuptial agreement. I'm not naive, Dad," Polly replied. She was aware of all the risks and dangers, and despite her love, she never turned off her critical thinking. "Does your fiancé know about your intentions? I doubt he will be pleased about this news," sarcastically retorted her father, and he was right. Albert was unpleasantly surprised by this turn of events. "Why? We love each other." Albert seemed genuinely perplexed. "Exactly. If you love me, you should want to protect me," insisted the bride. "From whom? From myself?" he questioned, his eyes filled with surprise. "From any unfortunate event that may occur. Life is long. Father sees it as a necessity, and I agree with him. I have had a will for a long time, just in case, and I strongly insist on a prenuptial agreement. And by the way, it is my father's terms. I cannot go against his word, no matter how much I want to." Polly played her strongest card, leaving Albert with no counter-argument. He had no choice but to agree, both to signing the document and to the proposed text. Naturally, Mr. Matthews took care of everything, ensuring that every detail was meticulously reviewed by a competent lawyer. Although Albert made concessions to Polly and his future father-in-law, Mr. Matthews remained dissatisfied by his daughter's choice. "Polly is capable and can earn a lot with her intellect, but can a saxophonist provide for his family? Music is undoubtedly a wonderful occupation, but Albert is clearly not a virtuoso. What about supporting his family? And what about the children? I wish he would earn enough for his own needs, at least. Yes, Mr. Matthews had a different upbringing and attitude towards family responsibility. Of course, his choice wasn't ideal either, but he considered that, in his case, it was different. It's one thing for a mature man to choose a life partner for enjoyment when he has already achieved everything, when he has lived his life. It is quite another when a young woman chooses such an unreliable partner. But regardless of Mr. Matthews's worries, the young couple had a lavish wedding and began their family life, despite the disapproving comments from outsiders. Not only friends and Polly's father, but also friends and relatives of Albert, criticised their obvious mismatch. How could a creative musician and a pragmatic and down-to-earth financier have anything in common? It would only become clear in 10 years that Albert was not as creative as he seemed, and Polly was not as pragmatic as she was perceived. Nevertheless, the newlyweds lived calmly, one could even say happily, despite everyone's negativity. They found common topics for conversation, shared hobbies, and had an interesting circle of acquaintances. They worked hard and rarely spent time together, but these meetings were exciting and pleasant, keeping the passion and desire to be together alive. At first, Polly wasn't focused on having children. She was building her career, learning from her father's experience, and preparing for succession. Her husband seemed to understand and didn't insist on having a baby right away. However, after 5 years of marriage, the topic of having children came up more often. Polly realized that it was time to seriously consider it and not miss her chance to become a mother. But just as the couple began actively planning, Mr. Matthews fell ill. His illness was severe, long and painful for him and everyone around him. Understandably, in such a state, Polly was not emotionally or physically ready to plan a pregnancy. When her father passed away, it felt like the light of her life had been extinguished. Despite his prolonged illness, she was not prepared for the loss of her closest and dearest person. At the funeral, people tried to console her, saying, "Thank God he's at peace now. Think of it that way, Polly." Polly forced a smile and accepted their condolences, although, in her heart, she wanted to lash out at such sympathizers. This period in her life was extremely difficult. She wanted to shut herself away and not come out under any circumstances, spending her days in bed under a blanket, crying and feeling sorry for herself. After a few days in this state, following her father's funeral, Polly realized that it wasn't a solution for her personally. Such behavior only worsened her depression and intensified negative thoughts. She needed to take action to live and function normally. As a result, she made the decision to return to work on the 9th day after her father's death. Work somehow distracted her, gradually pulling her out of her depression. Responsibilities, tasks and problems constantly arose and needed to be solved. She had to lead people and make important decisions. Polly constantly reminded herself that her father wouldn't want to see her crying and having tantrums about him. He would want to see a worthy successor to his endeavours. The period of life was hardly better than the years when her father was seriously ill. Back then she could see him, be with him, seek his advice and simply talk to him. Now it felt as if she was completely alone, surrounded by the rest of the world. Albert was there for her, but Polly's father's illness had strained their relationship and created a significant rift between them. They were physically side by side, but emotionally separate. That's why it came as a complete surprise to Polly when Albert started such a conversation at a rare dinner together. "Polly, we have a wedding anniversary coming up, 10 years, so maybe we should celebrate it properly," Albert asked, his voice filled with tension and doubt. "I understand that it has only been 8 months since the death of your father, and we are still in mourning, but I believe he would want to see you happy, smiling, We've experienced so much trouble and grief in the past few years. We deserve a celebration. Some positive emotions. What do you think?" At first, Polly was extremely sceptical of the idea, especially since Albert offered renting a restaurant and inviting family and friends for a full-fledged anniversary celebration. Polly didn't feel like it was a significant event, especially considering the strained relationship she had had with her spouse in recent years. "Think about the positive memories, the happy moments," Albert persisted. "Maybe it will help us become closer again, to remember why we got married and how happy and in love we were." "Why do we need a crowd of people for this?" Polly questioned incredulously. "Well, they are our loved ones, good people. They will come, be happy for us, give us gifts, and say nice words. It will definitely improve your mood, at least for that day. Look at yourself. You always seem so gloomy." Seeing Polly's nervous grin in response, Albert quickly added, "I didn't mean that you have no reason to feel that way. God forbid. I'm not blaming you. I just want to cheer you up. Maybe we can still make things work. I want it so badly," he said, taking his wife's hand in his palm. "Okay." Polly gave up after thinking over the idea. "But who will organise all of this? It sounds like a grand celebration, which is nice, but it will take a lot of time and effort to plan. I don't have the ability or resources for that. I'm sorry." "I understand. And I don't expect you to do it all by yourself. I have my own resources and specially trained people to help me. We'll hire a firm to take care of all the organisation," Albert suggested. "So I'll just need to show up at the appointed time and place?" Polly clarified. "Exactly. Preferably with a good mood, but I won't insist." Albert smiled in response. Polly agreed. After all, if nothing was required of her, maybe Albert was right, and it could be good for their relationship. What if everything could still be fixed and saved? After all, marriage requires compromise and giving in to your partner. Albert was so involved in the planning process, constantly sending photos and videos and writing to his wife, that she eventually became willingly ignited by the upcoming event. By the appointed date, Polly was already filled with enthusiasm, which infected her husband. For the first time in several years, her mood was truly elevated. The anticipation of a real celebration overwhelmed her. On the eve of the anniversary, Polly even went shopping. She wanted to look beautiful on this evening for him. Polly carefully selected her dress and even booked an appointment at the beauty salon. Unexpectedly, she felt the urge to make a drastic change and dye her blonde hair brown, as well as cut off her long locks. Looking at herself carefully in the mirror, Polly was pleased with her appearance. Her figure-hugging black dress suited her well, and her straight brown hair, reaching the middle of her shoulder blades, gave her a refreshing look. Her transformed appearance surprised everybody at the party, including Albert. Polly received numerous compliments, unlike anything she had ever experienced before. However, it seemed to her that it wasn't just about her looks or herself. Something inside her had changed, due to the anticipation and expectation of something good. The inner sadness, depression, and coldness began to recede, making room for more joy in her life. Those present noticed these changes, which created a noticeable difference before and after. Albert was truly delighted and shocked by the transformation. "My dear, you look amazing," he admired. He constantly toasted and complimented his wife, both privately and publicly. The guests also spoke kind and warm words, wishing them many more years of happiness together. The evening was truly magical. Polly felt incredibly happy. It was a long-forgotten feeling and emotion that she hadn't expected in years. She didn't expect to still be capable of such joy. But suddenly, the opposite of what she had felt just moments ago washed over her. Tears of sadness and despair started rolling down her cheeks. Her high spirits were replaced by a sudden collapse, as if triggered by a snap of her fingers. Instinctively, she sought refuge away from the guests, hoping to hide this sudden change in her state and mood. She entered the first door she found and closed her eyes tightly, trying to suppress the wave of panic and fear that seemed to come out of nowhere. Suddenly she heard a familiar voice. It was her husband, speaking on the phone. At first Polly couldn't focus on his words. Her inner state overwhelmed everything else. She was about to call out to her spouse for help, but then she caught some of his words. "Baby, you know this wasn't just a whim of mine. We talked about this 100 times. After hearing "baby," Polly's heart pounded even harder. If she thought she had been unwell a minute ago, now she realized the real pain. It was as if she had been struck in the solar plexus, making it hard for her to breathe. Only now did Polly realize that she had taken refuge in the storeroom. It consisted of 2 rooms, and Polly was in the first one. Albert was clearly in the second room, feeling safe with the closed door and without fear of being discovered. "Oh yeah, she's enjoying herself a lot. I wish you could see her. She even dyed her hair and changed her hairstyle. It suits her, by the way." Albert's laughter filled the room. The interlocutor must have said something as his next words followed. "Don't be jealous. You know who I really love." Polly thought to herself, "Well, at least now I know it's obviously not me, although I would like to meet your new favourite." Meanwhile, Albert continued after a pause, speaking to his mistress in a tone full of tenderness and affection. "Well, come on. It's only a week left to endure. We've been waiting so long. Why are you so upset?" Polly couldn't recall him speaking to her like that, except perhaps at the beginning of their relationship. "Stop!" Polly interrupted her own romantic musings. What week are they talking about? What are they waiting for? Thankfully, the conversation continued. "Did you get the medicine? Everything should be untraceable." Albert bombarded his mistress with questions. Polly felt another blow as she received the words. Thoughts became jumbled in her head. Something that wasn't supposed to be discovered. Are they planning to kill me? When this thought struck her, Polly struggled to contain her panic and horror. No, that's absurd. My death wouldn't benefit them. Attempting to focus on both listening and thinking proved challenging, with distractions aplenty. The only idea that surfaced after Polly's husband's last comment was the urgent need to activate the voice recorder on her phone. "I have to go," Albert replied to the unseen interlocutor. Upon hearing this, Polly was prepared to silently retreat instantaneously. However, her husband's mistress wasn't ready to let him go. "We've already discussed this, my love. Everything is prepared. We've gone through the plan multiple times. Medication, calling an ambulance, psychiatric evaluation, declaring incapacity, guardianship. It's straightforward." Polly leaned against the wall, grateful for the support it offered. Otherwise, she would have crumbled under the weight of such a clear and terrible plan. "Thank you, my hubby, for the accessible and concise explanation," she sarcastically muttered to herself, a grin on her face. That chuckle was the only defence her psyche had left. Pain, frustration, and despair threatened to make her scream at the top of her lungs. Polly gathered the shattered fragments of herself, desperate to remain composed and undiscovered. "I understand your worry. I'm nervous too, but it will all be over soon," Albert said affectionately. Polly wanted to storm into the room and reveal that she had overheard everything, but then a thought struck her. How safe would that be? We have been married for 10 years, and I never thought he could do this to me. What else did I not know about him? What else was he hiding? Contemplating this, Polly realized it wasn't safe to cause a scene or leave just yet. After all, he was still her husband. What other schemes could he come up with? Polly now knew the main point, and she returned to the restaurant hall. No, I must approach this differently, Polly reasoned to herself, now sitting calmly at the table, not showing any signs that something was amiss. So, They're going to admit me to a mental hospital and declare me incompetent. Well, that makes sense. It's basically the only thing my father didn't plan for. In case of my death and divorce, Albert will be left with nothing, while he and his new girlfriend need money. The woman pondered. There's no guarantee that they don't have another backup plan that could be even more dangerous for me. I need to prioritize my safety first and foremost, and then take action. And eventually, I need to teach this sweet couple a lesson too. I'm not sure how realistic it is to bring them to justice, but something must be done. What would have happened if I hadn't stumbled upon that godforsaken storeroom by chance, at the right moment? Weeks later, I would be lying in a hospital bed, completely incapacitated. According to my dear husband's plan, no, I cannot forgive such a cruel plan. Polly found it unbearably difficult to think. It felt as if her heart and soul had been torn from her chest and trampled on with army boots. Of course, love, especially as it was at the beginning of our relationship, is no longer there. But in a long-term relationship, it should be replaced with respect. And Albert obliterated everything. Cheating is such a small matter. He wanted to take everything away from me, not just money, but my sanity, my freedom. How can anyone be so cruel to another human being, especially to his own wife? It's inconceivable and impossible for a good, decent person. Apparently Albert is not one of those people. It's a pity that this realization came to me so late. All right, Polly, pull yourself together. We need a clear plan, Polly said to herself. So, step by step, first we need to protect ourselves from any harm from this couple. Second, we must teach the dear husband and his mistress a lesson, or better yet, punish them. It was only at this moment that Polly finally realized she couldn't handle this alone. She needed someone who could help, someone she could trust. This is a matter of life and death, so think more carefully, please, the woman reminded herself. This inner monologue was draining, preventing her from focusing, easily distracted by everything around her. Meanwhile, Albert was dancing with someone in the middle of the hall, as if nothing had happened. It's as if 15 to 20 minutes ago he hadn't discussed a detailed plan to eliminate his own wife. If I hadn't heard it myself, I would never have believed it. Polly concluded, so these emotions are unnecessary. I need to think and make decisions. The entire future of my life depends on it. There's no time to complain about fate. And yes, I can trust only Ed. Ed was her school friend. They had been friends throughout their school years, and even during their time in college. Then he moved to a neighbouring town in another city, and their lives took parallel paths. No, they didn't forget each other and kept in regular contact, but distance had certainly affected their friendship. With her purse in hand, Polly slipped out of the restaurant. Once outside, she walked a few 100 metres away and called a cab. She didn't want to linger at the entrance, where her guests occasionally went out for a smoke and fresh air. Polly had no desire to engage in conversation with a noisy crowd, and there was a risk of running into her husband face to face. That would be too much. She wasn't certain if she could maintain her composure when looking into his eyes. It's a good thing I have a 2-hour drive ahead of me. It will give me some time to recover and gather my thoughts, Polly reassured herself. She sat silently in the back seat of the cab, gazing out the window at the flickering lights, the forest and the scenery illuminated by the headlights. It was her way of trying to clear her mind. Several times she replayed the recorded conversation, and each time her husband's words pierced her heart like a knife, causing immense pain. Yet she pressed the play button over and over, as if trying to truly comprehend that her husband, with whom she had celebrated their 10-year wedding anniversary, was going to commit such a crime for the sake of money. I wonder if he has any pity for me, Polly wondered rhetorically, needlessly torturing herself with such thoughts. Of course, from his tone, it was clear that he didn't care. When the taxi driver finally pulled up to Ed's driveway, it was almost 3 o'clock in the morning. What a perfect time for an unexpected visit from a school friend, Polly muttered to herself. She even considered waiting until morning at a local bar, but realised that her problem couldn't wait. After standing outside for a moment, taking a deep breath, she dialed the correct apartment. Polly began to worry that Ed might not be home, but then she heard a familiar, disgruntled voice saying, "Who is it?" "Ed, please open the door. It's me, Polly." "Polly?" Ed interrogated, clearly still half asleep. Before the woman could respond, she heard the sound of the front door unlocking. "Hi, I'm sorry for coming at this hour, but it's an urgent matter. I have nowhere else to go." "Come in. Let's not broadcast the details of your personal life to the neighbours," Ed interrupted. "Come into the kitchen. Get settled. I'll make some tea. Or coffee? I just need to quickly wash up and change clothes." Polly obeyed unquestionably. She herself was thirsty and even hungry, which was odd. "Well, now tell me about your problem," Ed said, entering the kitchen with a towel in his hands. "By the way, I messaged you today, or rather yesterday, to congratulate you on your wedding anniversary and apologise for not being able to come, but you didn't reply." "I'm sorry, I didn't have an opportunity to text you. I had a lot on my mind. Everything happened at the celebration, Ed," Polly replied, struggling to hold back her tears. And then she described how she suddenly felt ill, how she found herself in the storeroom, and how she overheard her husband's conversation. "That's the whole story," she concluded. Ed had been silently listening all the time, his expression reflecting extreme surprise. "I can hardly believe it. What are you going to do?" he asked. "For now, my priority is ensuring my own safety and taking appropriate action to hold them accountable. Naturally, safety comes first. I don't know their plans or what they might do next, so I need to be prepared to counteract them." "Well, while you're here in my apartment, you're safe. No one can harm you," Ed realised. "Yes, that's why I came here. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Please forgive me for burdening you with my problems, even without apologising for waking you up," Polly said, feeling immensely ashamed of her behaviour. "Enough of that, or I'll be offended. Friends are here to help to support each other. So, since the first step of your plan is taken care of for now, let's wait until morning to figure out our next steps. You need some rest. I'm sorry, but you look terrible." "You know, even Monica Bellucci would look terrible in such a situation." Polly was a little offended. She understood that the friend did not want to hurt, but her female feelings also required protection, especially now, after the treason and betrayal of her husband. "Oh, it was just a bad joke. Okay, tomorrow, as soon as we wake up, we'll try to call one person. I think he can help us," Ed said, and then suddenly, as if awake, added, "Polly, did Albert call you? Did he write to you? Does he even know where you are?" "No, I turned on airplane mode on my phone as soon as I got into the cab. Clearly, he's called me hundreds of times, probably as soon as he noticed my disappearance. Just what am I supposed to tell him? Nothing yet." "Reasonable. Well, let's keep it that way until morning, and then we'll decide what's best." As soon as Polly's head touched the pillow, she fell asleep instantly, but nightmares overcame her all night and morning. Finally waking up around 11 a.m. and feeling worse than before the dream, Polly went to the kitchen, where Ed sat waiting for her, with a cup of freshly brewed coffee. "Good morning. How did you sleep?" He began the conversation good-naturedly. "Hi. To be honest, awful," Polly replied in a still sleepy voice. "I'd been having nightmares non-stop." "Well, let's start the case then. I had a friend in the army. You must have seen him more than once. His name is Paul. Remember?" "To be honest, no. Maybe visually." "Not the point. Now, he holds a serious post. He works at the law enforcement." "Where?" Polly didn't understand. "Why are you like a little one? He will help you. I say he works at the law enforcement. There are all sorts of services that don't need extra publicity or even a superfluous mention. Oh, I don't care. I totally believe you. And by the way, you don't want to put your own security service in the company on notice as well? Clarified Ed. I don't know who's in league with Albert, who his mistress is. The fact that I'm aware of their plans, they don't need to know yet. Quite logical. Then I'm calling Paul. Polly sat in the kitchen drinking her coffee. Ed stepped out to talk confidentially, and a few minutes later he came back, quite satisfied. He'll be here in half an hour. The man smiled. He's fast. Yeah, but I don't ask for his help often, and now I said it was an earnest matter. Indeed, not half an hour later the doorbell rang. Ed went to open it and came back with a man under 7 feet tall. Paul. Polly, nice to meet you. Well, tell me about your problems, Polly. The woman began to repeat everything she had told Ed before. Now everything was much harder on the morning ahead, strangely enough. Yesterday it had seemed like a horror movie she'd seen from the outside, and today it was different, much worse. And that's very clever, Paul said after Polly finished her story, and they listened to the audio recording together. What? Said Ed tensely. Clever, I say. So you have a prenuptial agreement in case of divorce and a will in case of death. Your incapacity fits perfectly to bypass all obstacles to your money. Well, it's a good thing you didn't write anything to him out of emotion. Now we need to write him something. Otherwise he might panic with his lady of the heart. I can tell you from experience that the worst thing is when a man who has nothing to lose panics. No one knows what they can do. Logical, yes, agreed Polly. But what should I write to him? You need to write something non-suspicious, so that he can believe it, so that it won't even occur to him that you are aware of his plan, Paul said firmly. Maybe play into their plan too, said the woman after a short thought. What if we come up with a reason for my disappearance, which will confirm once again my lunacy? I mean, it would be like a trump card for their plan. Polly tried to explain her train of thought. I don't understand, said Ed, confused. But I think I understand, interrupted Paul. But still, plausibility must be preserved. Men are usually fools, but your version will be scrutinized by your rival. I'm sorry if it hurts. That's what I was thinking too. They're trying to make me look crazy. Apparently, the reason for my condition will be made out of my father's illness and his death. Polly's voice trembled at this point, but she pulled herself together and continued. I'd been on medication and seen a therapist, so I suggest writing something similar to, I can't stand it anymore. I miss my dad so much, I need to be alone. Polly finished and waited for the men's reaction, nervously biting her lower lip and playing with the rings on her fingers. That seems fine to me. All right, write him all this, and I'll take care of the rest of things from here, Paul said and walked away. Ed escorted him out and closed the door. When he returned, Polly asked, What do you think? If you trust me, then trust Paul too. He saved my life. I know who I'm vouching for. Yeah, I'm not talking about him. Paul makes an extremely positive impression, though I shouldn't talk about it now. I'm the worst judge of character in the world. I'm asking in general. Neither you nor I are professionals in this matter. We delegated the task to a man who understands this business. And he gave us guarantees. I trust him. That's all I know, Polly. I'm sorry. I'm just very nervous, Polly said, and then added, Listen, I saw your bachelor's refrigerator. It's not good to eat like that. How about you go to the store with a list, and I'll cook for you on a large scale. Ed agreed with pleasure because he realized perfectly well that Polly needed to occupy her hands to turn off her head. The next few hours Polly spent quite actively. She cooked soup, made meatballs and put them away in the freezer. She also fried pork and even made pancakes. Ed went into another room so as not to disturb her, and when her friend finally called him to the table, He was simply amazed. Wow, do you often cook so much? No, of course I don't have time. I don't eat much at home, Polly said sadly. Ed reproached himself for asking such a question. He started to eat and praise, trying to please the woman and change her mood. But all his attempts were in vain. Polly only sank deeper into her thoughts. I'm going to bed, okay? I'm a bit tired. Will you wash the dishes after yourself? Of course. Thanks, Polly. It's delicious. What Polly really wanted was just to lie in peace and quiet, to be alone with herself and cry. She felt sorry for herself, no matter how ridiculous and silly it sounded. Yes, she was a grown woman who felt sorry for herself, sorry for her 10 years with her husband, sorry that it was ending like this, sorry for her life. For about 4 hours, the woman lay staring at the ceiling in the dark, occasionally wiping away tears. When she finally began to drift off to sleep, suddenly there was a nervous knock on the door. Polly, may I come in? Ed asked. Paul's calling. Of course, come in. Instantly throwing off her sleep, said the woman in response. I'll put you on speakerphone, Ed said and pressed the button. Paul, you're on speaker. Polly is listening. In general, we found out the name of your husband's mistress, the organizer of everything you heard. It's Kirsten. Kirsten? Repeated the woman, not realizing at first who she was talking about. Yes, the widow of your father. We already know for certain that she is the organizer and mastermind of the intended crime. Albert is only a co-executor. Polly froze. It was a new blow. She had been expecting it, but it was simply impossible to prepare for such a thing. Paul said goodbye and disconnected. Albert continued to stare at Polly, waiting for her reaction, but the woman suddenly jumped out of bed and rushed past, pushing the man away, and the sounds of vomiting came from the toilet. Polly stayed there for about 20 minutes, while Ed anxiously waited for her outside. He had been concerned about her emotional state before, but now her physical condition frightened him as well. Finally, gathering her strength, Polly came out and asked in a weak voice, Ed, would it be too much to ask you to go to the drugstore? No, of course not. What do you need? What's wrong with you? Her friend instantly responded, pocketing the essentials. I need pregnancy tests. Can you please get some? Sure, I'm on my way. The man quickly closed the front door behind him. Polly had been trying to conceive for years, going through numerous tests, and she had almost given up hope. And now she realized that she was almost 2 weeks late, to which she paid no attention. Stress and depression working almost around the clock. Then there was the added pressure of waiting for the anniversary. There was no time for thinking about that. Anyway, there was no doubt that she was pregnant. The pregnancy test was just the final confirmation. Ed returned quickly, seemingly literally running to the pharmacy. He bought 6 different tests, varying in price and characteristics, determined to be thorough, which even amused Polly. In a matter of minutes, all the tests showed the same result. There was a second stripe. Now she knew for certain that she was pregnant. Pregnant with her husband's child, who wanted to commit her to a mental institution and live off her money. Polly felt a panic attack coming on, but she was interrupted by Ed, who couldn't bear the silence, and knocked on the door. Polly, are you all right? He asked quietly and with concern. Yes, the woman snapped out of her thoughts. I'm coming out now. After washing her hands, Polly headed to the kitchen. What's going on? The man impatiently asked. I'm pregnant, what else? Polly replied. Really? Ed stammered. Is it Albert's baby? Of course. Who else would he be? Unlike him, I didn't cheat. Ed looked at her with horror-filled eyes. He seemed more frightened and agitated than the expectant mother herself. And... He hesitated, cutting himself off mid-sentence. I will give birth, of course. It's not the baby's fault. He doesn't need to know his father or be told about him. What matters is upbringing, not genetics. We've been trying to have a baby for years, but it never happened, no matter what we did. And now just one day, after discovering who my husband truly is, I find out I'm pregnant. Destiny must have a very strange sense of humour indeed. I don't know how you're holding up, to be honest. That's a lot of news for one day, the man said sympathetically and stroked Polly's shoulder. Is there anything I can do for you? You already do too much for me. I don't have enough to thank you for all of your help. Polly, stop it, please. Wouldn't you help me if I were in this situation? You wouldn't be in such a situation. The woman smiled sadly in response. You're not that stupid and gullible. I don't like your despondency and apathy. Polly, you've known him for so many years. 10 years only in a legal marriage. It is quite logical that you did not expect a trick from him. What's more, you competently laid the straw for yourself. There's only one life lesson in this, that for every cunning person, there's a more cunning person. And anyway, stop depressing. You wanted a baby. God gave him to you. Maybe not the way you wanted it, but he gave him to you. And you're just sitting there sulking. Is that any way to treat a gift? What do you want? Tell me. I'll go to the store. Or we'll order delivery. We'll celebrate this news. Ed was so contagious in his emotions, in his joy, that Polly couldn't help but give in. The man brought her favourite cake, and they did not hesitate to eat it with spoons, right out of the box. Ed also brought Polly a cute teddy bear as a present, saying that it would be the first toy for the baby. In general, the two of them sat in the kitchen until morning, laughing, talking and having fun. In the end, Polly felt happy, despite all her circumstances. She was immensely grateful to her friend for his help and support. They suffered without information for almost a week, but Paul did not report anything and did not call them. Ed tried to call himself several times, but only received a laconic answer. If there is information, I will call. This greatly discouraged both Polly and her friend, but in this situation nothing else depended on them. It was necessary to submit to fate and wait for results from the competent man. So they were greatly surprised by the doorbell ringing at 7 in the morning. Ed went to see who was there. It turned out that on the threshold stood Paul and smiled happily. Good morning, how are you? Hi, Polly called from the room. What's the news? You're in a hurry to get right to the point? I have news. Can you make me a coffee? I've just got off the road. I've been rushing half the night to get here. Polly, having hastily brushed her teeth and cleaned herself up a bit, ran to organise a quick breakfast and make coffee. When everything was set up and everyone sat down at the table, Paul began his story. Sorry, I'm starving. Since yesterday morning, I've only been drinking water. There was no time at all. Anyway, Polly, get ready. Let's go back to your place in the city. The investigator is waiting for us. Albert and his accomplice have been detained. There's evidence, and they're already playing a game. Who will give up his accomplice faster? Polly listened to the conversation in silence, afraid to even say something, afraid that it was a dream, that she would wake up again in a nightmare, in that storeroom, and there would be no Ed and Paul next to her, and there would be no pregnancy ahead, but a place of residence in the padded room of a psychiatric hospital. Polly, are you okay? Ed asked, noticing the fact that the woman was silent. I'm fine, guys. Thank you so much. Polly forcefully held back her tears. It's early to thank yet. When they're convicted, then it's a different matter. But now you are perfectly safe because they will be in custody until the trial. They can't escape justice, especially as each of them has already signed a heartfelt confession, Paul reported. Then why do I have to go to the investigator? To testify. You're the victim. You filed a statement. Well, you'll file it retroactively, so get your stuff. When Polly went to her room, Paul said to Ed, You talk to her. She's going to have to meet her husband and his mistress. No other way. No other way? Paul, she's pregnant. I'm afraid for her. Is she pregnant by that jerk? Yeah, by her husband, of course. She didn't know. Poor woman. Even though she's rich, well, we'll help her any way we can. Even the trip back to the city was difficult for Polly, not to mention what she experienced at the investigator's office. It was so gloomy there. The investigator tried to cheer her up, but it didn't help. Polly wanted to get up and run away, although Paul had made arrangements, and the procedure took as short a time as possible. So, home? Ed asked when they finally got out and into the car. Where's my home now? Polly interrogated philosophically. Can you take me to our old country house? I can, but why there? Kirsten wasn't there. Albert wasn't there. I want to erase those people and the memories of them from my life forever. I'm going to sell the apartment where we lived and the house as well, and buy a new one. I don't want to bring my baby where that monster lived. Radically, said Ed, starting the car engine. I'll never be able to clean up what happened without it. Stop your wailing, Polly. Imagine that fool Albert wouldn't have been provoked by this Kirsten. He alone would not have decided to commit such a plan, and you would live with him, not suspecting how he really feels about you and who he really is. Yes, you paid a heavy price for it, but fate gave you a child in return. Isn't that a good exchange? Despite the pressing feelings, Polly was eternally grateful to fate that she had a man on whom she was able to lean in a difficult moment. It's scary to imagine what would have happened without him. Ed stayed at Polly's house for a week and helped her with all the difficulties that arose. He went with her to the doctor, helped with documents, went to the investigator. In general, his help was difficult to overestimate. After Ed's departure, the woman had to learn to live alone again. This had never happened to her before in her life. First, she had lived with her parents, then with her father, then married. Now, she was completely alone, left to her own devices. Though, of course, it wouldn't be for long. Not even 8 months later, the centre of her universe would be born. All these months, Polly spent her time and energy on business and worries to ensure that everything would be ready in time for the birth of her baby. She put great effort into solving real estate issues and subsequent repairs. At some point, she became so tired of these problems that she began to regret her decision to change everything hastily. However, she was pleased with the result. Everything in her new apartment was done in her style, exactly the way she liked it. Naturally, pregnancy took a tremendous amount of strength and energy, but she learned to accept all the problems and troubles as temporary difficulties. Everything passes, and this too shall pass. The eternal wisdom of Solomon was finally reflected in Polly's soul. She also took a philosophical approach to the fact that she was periodically summoned to the investigator's office and then to court. At first, when Paul announced that Albert and Kirsten were detained, Polly thought that it would be incredibly difficult to meet with them. However, she had to attend several court sessions, where she saw those who wished her harm and wanted to ruin her life, and she had learned to take it all easy. Fortunately, by the time she gave birth, all matters were completely settled. She had bought and arranged the new apartment, prepared all the baby things, set up and adjusted her business, finalized the divorce, and even the trial was completed. Polly gave birth to a wonderful and healthy boy. Although the labour had some complications, everything ended safely, and that was the main thing. Both mum and baby were no longer in danger and felt good. Polly named the boy Ed in honour of her best friend. Ed met Polly and the baby at the discharge from the separate house. Along with him, Paul also arrived with a huge bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums, Polly's favourite. "Take a look at Paul. He's a good man," Ed winked at her. And it seemed that even without his recommendation, Polly had already been paying close attention to him for quite some time, and he turned out to be a really good man. At first, Paul helped because of his friendship with Ed. Then he helped her through his work, and then through his personal friendship with Polly, visiting her more and more often and assisting with various small things. It never even occurred to the woman for the first few months that this tall man was simply expressing his sympathy in this way, trying to woo her. And so it all started between them. Polly could not have imagined that after such a painful divorce, all the drama, and becoming a mother, she would dive headfirst into a new romance. But her heart told her that Paul was worth it, that he wouldn't let her down or betray her. We can only hope that with Paul, Polly will find her happiness as a woman, build a strong and real family, and finally be happy.
Nick married Jolie 3 years ago. To be honest, he wouldn't have married her if she hadn't become the sole owner of the business after her father's sudden death. Her father, a seemingly young and strong businessman, had died unexpectedly from a stroke. Jolie was Mr. Macmillan's only child, and she was the sole heiress to his fortune. That is why Nick, handsome slacker, who was used to living at the expense of women, paid attention to her. Jolie was captivated by Nick's charming promises, while he planned to stay with her until a more profitable opportunity arose. But it soon turned out that the most favourable option, the jackpot of his life, was Jolie. She inherited her father's colossal wealth, and Nick knew exactly how to take advantage of it. He believed he could easily manipulate her deep affection for him to control her fortune. And everything was going as well as possible for Nick. The girl was deeply grieving. Her father had been her pillar of support and the most significant person in her life, so Nick quickly surrounded Jolie with care and support at such a hard time. The young and naive girl was unaware that the worst moment of her life had spurred Nick to hide his true nature even more. At least until their wedding, he maintained his good behaviour, ensuring there was no turning back. After the funeral, he proposed marriage, of course suggesting they wait until her mourning period for her father was over. Nick was adept at deception, manipulation and pretense. He could become whoever he needed to be and do whatever was expected of him. With his wealthy girlfriends, he typically didn't put in much effort, thinking there would always be another wealthy woman. With Jolie, the name was worth it. The efforts would not be in vain, and the cunning man clearly understood it. But the first hurdle for him came unexpectedly from a source he couldn't have foreseen. Jolie's father had a best friend. He was also his main deputy in the company and godfather to Jolie. Mr. Chinland understood right away that Jolie was head over heels in love and wouldn't be dissuaded from marriage. Her grief over losing her father made her seek a replacement. But as an intelligent and shrewd man, Mr. Chinland categorically insisted on the prenuptial agreement, and he managed to win Jolie over to his side. "Nick, it's for business. Is it that hard?" Jolie asked, repeating what Mr. Chinland had told her. "This is humiliating. Do you think I need your money?" the man retorted, indignant at this turn of events. "Honey, it's just a formality. We only need it in case of divorce. My godfather really wants us to sign it. He's always been like a second father to me." Jolie may have been naive about financial matters, given that she'd never had to worry about money, but she wasn't a fool in other respects. When she set a goal, she achieved it, no matter what. Nick was pinned against the wall and had to agree to all of Mr. Chinland's terms. The marriage contract formulation was standard, but it curtailed Nick's rights completely. It was evident that the business and all other property inherited from Jolie's father could not become joint property of the spouses. Nick assumed he would receive a share in the dividends, acquire new property and assets. However, the contract, drafted by a top-class lawyer, prevented Nick from having this opportunity. Despite this, Nick believed the marriage was still beneficial to him, as he would access his wife's finances without control and build up capital for the future, He was going to take money from the common budget on a daily basis and transfer it to his name. But Nick was mistaken in this regard too. Mr. Chinland was a dedicated, decent and responsible person who not only controlled Jolie's financial flows in business, but also her personal finances. Nick had limited funds for personal expenses, but nevertheless he remained optimistic about the future and waited to see how the situation would develop. And soon it turned out that his patience was indeed rewarded. Jolie had been trying to conceive since their wedding day. She desired motherhood, but each new cycle brought bitterness and disappointment. Initially, she attributed it to nerves and stress caused by the frantic pace of life. She took business into her own hands and learned a lot on the go, which was naturally exhausting. After more than a year of unsuccessful attempts, the woman sought help from specialists, underwent a full medical examination, and identified the cause of the failures. Jolie's symptoms, which she had attributed to a busy lifestyle, turned out to be alarm bells. Her body was warning her of problems, but she had ignored it, and finally the doctors diagnosed her with cancer. She underwent almost 2 years of treatment and suffering, but with little success. All this time, Nick played the role of husband only nominally. His vested interest was that Jolie simply did not exist, and he had not managed to hide it well enough. Although they never openly discussed it, Jolie was aware of the numerous women her husband had cheated on her with. But Nick believed he was adept at conspiracy and manipulation. He believed he was successfully playing the role of a dying wife's husband without arousing suspicion. He felt lucky and thought he only needed to endure a little longer to achieve his desired outcome. However, Nick's behaviour was condemned and discussed by everyone, from the nurses in the hospitals where Jolie was cured to Mr. Chinland. The man was furious and helpless. He couldn't comprehend why Jolie would desperately want to preserve her marriage on the brink of the grave. He also was worried that Jolie had no will. As a result, her husband automatically became her only heir. That scoundrel inherits everything, including the fruits of Jolie and her father's also contributed to. All of their hard work would be for nothing, an exercise in futility. Mr. Chinland was sure that Nick, this wastrel, would squander all the property within a few years. However, the elderly man was at a loss on how to broach such a delicate subject with his goddaughter, who until yesterday emanated health and youth, and now had no chance. She was dying, and it would happen in the very near future. The score was counting down to weeks. Nick was already rubbing his greedy hands. His eyes were burning with anticipation, getting rid of this frowning and sick wife and acquiring a solid capital. It seemed to him that the matter was in the bag. Mr. Chinland prayed that he did not have to start a conversation about the will himself, but fortunately it was not necessary. Jolie started the conversation herself. Her secret left him speechless, because she had planned everything meticulously, with finesse and a ruthlessness he never expected. Revenge is truly a dish best served cold, and Jolie executed it flawlessly. The way Jolie came up with and realised did not take much effort and time, but she, completing her journey here on Earth, realised her main dreams. Unfortunately, Jolie's loved ones did not witness a miracle, and she passed away without recovering. She had arranged the details of her funeral with great care before her death. Serene and resolute, she clearly conveyed her final wishes. The day after the farewell ceremony, the notary called the people mentioned by Jolie in her will and asked to arrive for its announcement. Nick was shocked by such news. He was sure that his wife had not drawn up any official document in case of her death, and he would become her sole heir, as the law usually provides in such cases. Still hoping for the best, he went to the appointed meeting, taking his new mistress, Shirley, who was a striking beauty. Upon entering the notary's office, Nick spotted Mr. Chinland and Jolie's friend, Kurt Tergerson. But what caught him off guard was that Kurt wasn't alone. He was pushing a stroller with a baby boy inside. Nick was completely unaware of Kurt's marriage or the birth of the child. Although Nick wasn't an expert in any field, he certainly wasn't foolish. It didn't take him long for him to realise that there was a hidden agenda at play, and he had been outsmarted. Despite this, curiosity overwhelmed him. He wanted to know what Jolie had devised, even though it was already evident that it would be something incredibly humiliating for him. For approximately 15 minutes, everyone remained silent, occupying different corners of the room. No one else arrived. The notary seemed to have deliberately prolonged the introductory part as much as possible, telling them why they had gathered, what an honour it was to read the deceased's last will and testament. Even then, Nick could tell by the wicked grin that remained on Mr. Chinland's face that the contents of the will were a secret only to Nick. Finally, Nick heard his name. "To my lawful husband, Nick, I deny the inheritance," read the notary. After reading this modest and short sentence, the notary looked at Nick and asked him if he had understood the essence of what he had said. The humiliated man had no choice but to nod. At that moment, Shirley took his hand and tried to get up to leave defiantly, but Nick held her in place. She looked at him with a questioning look that the man ignored. He himself would have wanted to leave the scene of his public humiliation as quickly as possible, but the play was not over, and the invited audience needed to see it through to the end. After a brief pause, the notary proceeded. "I bequeath all my personal property to my only son, Robert Tergerson. Until he reaches adulthood, I appoint his father, Kurt Tergerson, and Mr. Chinland as guardians and administrators of his estate." A shocking revelation hit Nick like a gut punch. What? A son from Kurt? His patience broke and burst out with a surprised scream. Other than Nick and Shirley, the news didn't come as a surprise to anyone present. "Is the boy Jolie's biological child?" Nick asked, gasping for breath and raising his voice. "Yes, Robert is the biological son of Jolie and Kurt," clarified Mr. Chinland. "She hasn't been pregnant in the last 2 years. That's impossible." Nick desperately clutched at straws, despite realising that nowadays being pregnant wasn't necessary to have a child. The godfather smirked, clearly relishing Nick's shock and disappointment. "The advancements in medicine these days are astounding," he remarked. Looking at this scene, Kurt remembered the horror he felt 2 years ago when he discovered that his best friend was seriously ill, with little chance of recovery. It was shocking to him how calmly she spoke about her limited time and what she needed to do. That's when she revealed her desire to become a mother, no matter what. "I had my eggs preserved before starting treatment. I was told that I probably wouldn't be able to raise my own child, but I insisted, Kurt. I grew up without a mother, and I know it isn't easy, but I always felt her love and protection." "Does Nick agree to raise the child alone?" Kurt cautiously inquired. "Who would allow him? He would gladly become a guardian and use the baby's money, as he lacks conscience. No, I've already realised that my dear spouse is someone of questionable character, to put it correctly, and his reaction to my diagnosis and prognosis. I don't even want to speak about him. This man isn't worth getting upset about." "And what about the baby?" "That's what I wanted to discuss with you." Jolie hesitated, which was quite unusual for her since she was usually fearless. "I don't know how to broach the subject delicately. Maybe there is no delicate way. In short, I would like you to be the father of my child," she exclaimed in a high-pitched voice. "Are you joking? You have a husband." Kurt clearly wasn't prepared for this. "Yes, I do have a husband, and I will have him until the day I die. I've already made that decision, Kurt. Of course, we won't sleep together. It's impossible given my current condition. I can't carry the baby myself, unfortunately. I had my eggs preserved. Now we need the biological material from the future father. Naturally, I also need a woman to carry and give birth to him, but luckily such services are available now. At first, Kurt thought it was absurd, the nonsensical ramblings of a desperate woman. Yet she had an entire logical plan in her head, and it turned out that she had already completed a significant amount of preparatory work, researched the legal aspects, arranged for a reproductive clinic's services, and even found a mother for the future baby. Kurt, I could use the services of a donor for a father for the baby. I really want to leave a piece of myself behind. But when you think about it, who will the baby be with? I've been thinking a lot, but you're the only one I can rely on. I am sure of you. Knowing you for so many years, I believe that you will be a great father. I understand that you want to create your own family, get married and have children naturally. It's logical. But please think about it. Don't answer me right now. For me, after what happened with Nick, it is critical that the father of my child is someone who doesn't prioritize money, someone who won't exploit my assets. I'm not as naive as I was before marriage. Nick taught me a lot. Now I have a lot of life experience. As for you, you don't need any money at all. You have plenty. My father has, the man replied, correcting Jolie's reasoning for the first time. You know you're going to get it. You work tirelessly to keep the family company thriving. You've never been needy. Now, I know for a fact that a man who grew up poor will never stop thinking about having enough to eat. And if his decency is also lacking, there will be a big problem. I have experienced that firsthand, the woman sadly added. To be honest, I'm completely confused. I had an entirely different idea of becoming a father. I need to consult my parents. Understand that I can't make such a decision alone. I will need the help of close family members when I become a father, so I have to inform them and ask for their opinion. Jolie had no objection, so she only requested that Kurt promise to keep in a secret that information. The conversation with Kurt's parents was very difficult. His father neutrally accepted everything that was said, listened to all the explanations and assured that he would support his son's decision and would help as much as he could with his grandchild. His mother, however, was not as open-minded. Like all mothers, she wanted him to marry a good woman and have children together. She felt immense sympathy for Jolie. She had known her from childhood and thought highly of her. But this request, it was very difficult for a mother to accept that her potential grandchild's mother was dying and that the child would be carried by another woman. Can't the child get the disease? The woman dreaded this question, finding it awful, awkward and out of place. However, how else could she ensure her grandson's safety? Jolie does not have a hereditary form of the disease, Kurt answered. This reassured the anxious woman to some extent, though not completely. Nevertheless, after careful consideration, she expressed her support for her son's decision. Kurt himself also struggled with indecision. Jolie's proposal caught him off guard, but after some period of contemplation, he concluded that there was no reason to refuse. When he conveyed his approval to Jolie, she was overjoyed, and they began implementing her plan step by step. While Kurt sat and reflected on the life-altering story, Mr. Chinland reminisced about the conversation with Jolie a little over 2 months ago. Starting from afar, she said that she honoured Mr. Chinland as a second father and hoped he wouldn't refuse. And then she blurted out that she wanted him to become the guardian of her son. Initially, Mr. Chinland thought his goddaughter was delirious. But as Jolie shared the full story, the godfather was left in shock. Not only had Jolie and Kurt made such a bold decision, but they had also hidden it for so long. "How old is the baby now?" Mr. Chinland asked. "Robert is 8 months old," Jolie smiled. "You both truly know how to surprise," Mr. Chinland explained, still processing the shock. "I don't want Nick to find out about the child before I die. In fact, he will only find out when my will is announced. I've already had it drafted, and it's held with the notary. However, there's one aspect that still needs to be resolved. Robert will have only one parent. I've reassessed many aspects of my life, and I don't want to leave anything to chance. Kurt has parents, so if anything were to happen to him, Robert will go to them. But I want you to have rights too, just in case. Being good at understanding people, the elderly man sensed that it could be too dangerous to act with Nick like this, even though Jolie's husband fully deserved such treatment. "Jolie, are you sure that this is the way to treat your husband? He's a repugnant man, involving oneself with his means. I mean, why do you need such vengeance from beyond the grave?" He expressed his thoughts, then immediately stopped himself. "Sorry, dear, for being so rude." "You know, I've pondered this for 2 years. I witnessed Robert's birth, saw how Kurt loves him, and his parents adore him. I require nothing else. I have accepted the situation. Currently, I am much more annoyed by those who speak to me about some mystical recovery and healing. And as for Nick, I loved him so deeply. I believed in him with all my heart. But he turned out to be the most ungrateful beast. He comes to my hospital as if it were hard labour. Do you know his girlfriends brought him here?" The elderly man silently nodded, bitterness apparent in his expression. "And I should forget this? Absolutely not. He cherishes money above all else, so that's how I will punish him. It will be a surprise for him. You see, I kept everything from you. It was immensely difficult. I wanted to introduce you to my son right away, but I was exceedingly cautious so that no one would accidentally find out and tell Nick. This may be my farewell to him. I even wrote him a letter. The notary will deliver it." Mr. Chinland made several attempts to dissuade his goddaughter. It seemed to him like an ill-advised decision. Yet the woman maintained her stance, and he had to concede. After all, it is her final will. It deserves to be respected. Amidst the sudden silence in the notary's office, everyone was engrossed in their own thoughts. Of course, you don't need to be a fortune-teller to guess that Nick cursed Jolie in every possible manner. People like him have no inkling that they themselves might be to blame, and that others' behaviour could be a perfectly logical response. Yet such introspection is too complex for such people. Why bother searching for problems within oneself? Strangely enough, it was Shirley who interrupted the silence. She tried to take her lover by the elbow to lead him out. However, Nick had no intention of leaving, as he had not finished speaking. "Are you sure that I'm not entitled to anything at all? A mandatory share, or whatever it's called? I am the husband, after all," the man shrieked. Even Shirley winced at such behaviour, let alone the others present. Only the elderly notary, accustomed to such conduct, remained unsurprised. "According to the will, you are not included in the circle of persons entitled to a mandatory share in the inheritance. Moreover, I carefully studied your marriage contract. Its text is attached here." The notary patted the thick folder in front of him with his hand. "You have no chance, even when appealing to the courts, although you naturally retain the right to such an appeal." "Of course I will dispute it. It's unclear who this illegitimate child really is, who she claimed as her son." Nick went on a rampage and didn't realise what he was saying. Kurt struggled to restrain himself from punching the arrogant man. Even the usually calm Mr. Chinland flushed in anger. Only the notary remained as calm as a python. For him, this was a typical workday, and nothing was surprising. He calmly responded, "Attached here are not only the child's birth certificate, but also medical documents providing clear answers about his birth. Furthermore, as per the deceased's request, there is a DNA examination results confirming that your wife is the biological mother of Robert Turgerson. I should inform you that all documents have been gathered completely and thoroughly." "Can I see?" Nick wanted to see the evidence. "No, you can only review the part that pertains to you. All other documents, especially those regarding a child, can only be disclosed with the parent's consent."
Of course, I do not permit it, Kurt immediately interjected. So, it's possible only in a court proceeding if the court deems it necessary to demand these documents. This was the final straw for Nick. He stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him, vowing not to let this matter rest. His mistress, however, was more polite. She said goodbye and left, quietly closing the door behind her. Does it matter that he didn't sign that the will was read to him? Mr. Chinland asked the notary. There are many like him. It's nothing more than a formality, the notary reassured him. It would be funny if it weren't so sad. I still don't understand how Jolie got involved with him. Mr. Chinland said his thoughts aloud, but his question remained rhetorical. The men quickly signed the necessary documents and shook hands. Mr. Chinland helped Kurt put little Robert into the stroller. Will you join us? I want to take a walk, get some fresh air, and it's good for the baby, Kurt asked. Certainly I'll join. For a while they walked in silence, listening to the rustle of the stroller wheels. Do you think Jolie would be satisfied with how I'm coping? Kurt finally asked that which had been bothering him. I'm sure of it. You're a wonderful father, and it's clear to see how much you both mean to each other. Jolie's godfather reassured him. To be honest, there's one thing I can't get out of my head. You know, I think Jolie told you that I advised her against what just happened at the notary office. Are you talking about this circus with the will and how Nick found out about Robert? Mr. Chinland nodded in response. Of course, Kurt replied. I was the one who constantly brought up the conversation about that. I didn't like this idea from the very beginning. He's a nasty type, angry, stupid and mercenary. Why provoke him? Honestly, I even contemplated telling him when the baby was already born. But Jolie was hiding it so much, I believed I had no right to. I decided that she just didn't want to deal with him herself and left these disputes to us. Today I saw him with that woman, showing no shame at all. Now I question whether I did the right thing by not insisting on my stance. His reaction, the expression on his face, it was horrifying. It would have been better to get rid of him earlier. I think Jolie didn't want to either. That played a part too. And revenge. She wanted revenge because she loved, regardless of what she said later. She loved intensely, and this corrupted love found no other way out. My poor girl. The elderly man wiped a tear trickling down his cheek. Don't grieve for her. She asked us not to. She asked us to direct all our love, which was for her, to Robbie. Kurt comforted Jolie's godfather. While the men reminisced, Nick and Shirley watched from the car, discussing the same topic. So you won't get anything at all, right? The girl asked in disbelief, blinking rapidly. You're such a fool. You've heard that there are no chances because of this foundling. OK, let's go. We need to take at least something valuable and move it to my apartment. 3 days later, Kurt finally mustered the courage to visit Jolie's house, only to find it empty. He had braced himself for a confrontation and even bought 2 security guards for his protection, but Nick got it right and went back to his place, of course not forgetting to take with him plenty of valuables. Now Nick was sitting alone in the small kitchen of his tiny apartment, nursing a bitter whiskey. Shirley had left him, which was quite expected. Why would she need a beggar man? As Nick pondered his current situation, he couldn't help but reflect on how he had ended up here. Before, women used to pay him to be with him, but now he needed to offer money to a young beautiful girl to stay in her company. Ironically, Nick, a gigolo past his prime and deteriorated due to his vices, didn't blame himself for his circumstances. In his thoughts, his wife was the villain who had drained his vitality and dashed his hopes, leaving without inheritance. He was so looking forward to the money. In his fantasies he was young, handsome, successful, and extremely wealthy. But as a parting shot, Shirley had told him some harsh truths. No one needed him. He was just a poor drunkard, living in delusions of grandeur. It was very difficult to come to terms with that reality. His dreams of wealth and success, largely contingent on his ex-wife, crumbled like a house of cards. His aspirations to be a successful businessman were dashed. Blinded by his ego, he failed to see his own part in his downfall. Instead, he blamed his deceased wife, who he saw as the root of all his problems. Nick spent nearly 2 weeks in a drunken stupor, seeking escape from reality, and his resentment grew stronger each day. During one bleak hangover-filled morning, he decided he had had enough. He realised that he wouldn't achieve success or revenge on Jolie by drinking. Nick felt deeply humiliated. A few days prior, men from Mr. Chinland had arrived and practically forced him to hand over his car keys, tearing up the power of attorney Jolie had given him. "Didn't you know the power of attorney loses its legal force after the death of the person who issued it?" one of the men said in a derogatory manner. In his mind, Nick saw himself as a saint who never left his sick wife's side. He conveniently overlooked his endless intrigues, gambling, alcohol abuse, and dismissive behaviour towards his wife. "What a pity that she's dead, and I can't hit her," he thought. "So many times I barely restrained my impulse, encouraging myself that my patience would be generously rewarded." He began to ponder how he would like to take revenge on her and what he should do now. At first he wanted to desecrate her grave, but then, contemplating what was dear to Jolie and what harm would cause her the most suffering, he saw another answer, which was lying on the surface. Robert. Nick was literally struck by electricity when this idea came to his head. He laughed viciously, having finally devised his revenge plan. Of course, there were many issues to resolve and structure, but he had decided on the main thing. He was not going to hurt Robert. What's a mother's worst nightmare? Not being able to help her child in trouble. That's precisely what he decided to do. The plan of his inflamed imagination was simple: to kidnap the baby, take him far away, and leave him at an orphanage after a week. Thoughts of revenge and fantasies of it warmed Nick's soul, if he had one, of course. He hadn't smiled like this for a long time. True, such a grimace looked rather intimidating and scary, but Jolie's husband didn't care at all. You could even say that he was happy. As he thought through all the details, he experienced euphoria. The object of his hatred was not nearby, but Nick eagerly imagined how Jolie would have suffered from her inability to help her child. Once he had settled on a plan theoretically, he began to think about the practical side. He needed to find out everything about Robert's movements and those with whom he leaves the house, to perfectly select the place and time for his crime. Nick had known Kurt well in his past and was even familiar with his parents, having visited their house. He also knew that their elite suburban settlement had enhanced security. As Nick began to contemplate his plan, he realized the challenges he would face. He couldn't predict how much time he would spend observing from the forest with binoculars, studying the child's daily routine and movements. Is the game worth the candle? Absolutely. Nick reasoned with himself. His mental state had been noticeably affected after the announcement of the will. She ruined my life, and I will ruin the life of her child. A rich heir? He will live off the state's readiness, and his mother will watch from the other world, realizing she is to blame for everything. The man laughed maliciously. If an indifferent person had been near Nick at that moment, they would have noticed the drastic changes in his mind and taken him to a doctor. Unfortunately, history doesn't entertain hypotheticals. Nick was unmatched in achieving his goals. If he had a plan, no matter how foolish it seemed, he saw it through to the end. He spent 2 full days not watching but preparing the necessary conditions for it. Nick scouted the entire territory to find the perfect vantage point. He needed a spot that overlooked the entire settlement, especially the Turgeson house, while remaining hidden. The man devoted all his effort and time to finding a place that he deemed perfect in every aspect. For over a week, Nick rose at dawn and hurried to the cottage settlement, remaining there until late evening. He kept a constant watch with binoculars, recording every activity in the house, who arrived and when they departed. He diligently maintained a notebook to ensure he didn't miss anything. He found that the child was cared for by Kurt, grandmother and nanny. Of course, Kurt and his mother were unsuitable for implementing Nick's plans. They both knew him well and could identify him immediately. Nick had no intention of being punished for the crime he had committed. Of course, he anticipated that the police would come to him with questions, but he hoped to wave them away. Therefore, the nanny was chosen as the victim of the attack in Nick's plan. She had a fixed schedule, and she always walked with Robert in the same locations along the same routes. Fortune favoured Nick. On Wednesday, during her daytime walk with the peacefully sleeping baby, the nanny left the secured territory of the settlement. She followed a small forest path to a clearing where another nanny from a nearby settlement met her. They conversed, and Nick even heard their laughter. The man decided to stop watching the settlement daily to avoid attracting attention. He needed to remain inconspicuous. Now he only visited on Wednesdays, trying to coincide with the nanny's daytime walk. Everything was precise, like clockwork. Each Wednesday the nanny would leave the safety of the settlement and walk the forest path. For 4 consecutive Wednesdays he observed the system to ensure it did not fail. On the 4th Wednesday he knew he would return the next week at the same time to take away the child. To execute his plan, he purchased a powerful stun gun from a local market, paying cash to avoid being traced. He meticulously planned every detail to avoid capture. Similarly, he bought an old car, stole license plates and attached them to the vehicle. He strategically determined where to park the car so it was close enough to escape but not so near as to attract attention. He also considered his appearance, taking steps to disguise his figure and face to avoid recognition. Thoughts of kidnapping consumed him. He went to sleep and woke up with these thoughts, even dreaming about the act in precise detail. As the appointed day approached, he lost nearly 7 kilos and became a mere shadow of his former self. A quick glance at him was enough to realize this was a man to be feared. Traces of neurosis and obsession began to etch themselves onto his face. On Wednesday, he parked in a pre-selected spot and waited. As he saw the nanny pushing the stroller down the path, he trembled. The extensive planning had disconnected him from the reality of his impending actions. He was about to confront a stranger, assault her with a stun gun, snatch the child from the stroller, and flee to his car. Nick had imagined the situation to be different, more like a scene from a video game. Here, however, everything was real. The woman, the baby in the stroller, and the baby examining his surroundings with curiosity. By nature, Nick was not violent, and crossing that line was difficult for him. But his deep-seated hatred for Jolie drove him to carry out his plan. He approached the boy's nanny, pushed her away from the stroller, and knocked her down. He then used a taser on her, and she passed out from the shock. All that was left was to take the child out of the stroller and run to the car. However, things went awry at this point. He bent down to unfasten the belts. Suddenly, he felt a blow to his head and fell to the ground. The next thing he knew, an elderly man was standing over him. He was scolding Nick and tying his hands. Nick lost consciousness again. The mysterious man turned out to be a gamekeeper who was well known in 2 nearby elite communities. His guardhouse was practically in the middle, just beyond a clearing where nannies from the neighbouring settlements often gathered. His dwelling was concealed behind dense greenery and went unnoticed by Nick. That day, Mr. Mayo had been returning from the local store when he noticed suspicious activity. He later explained to the police officer, I saw someone standing guard, dressed entirely in black, despite the morning heat. I decided to watch a little and investigate."
Due to his many years as a gamekeeper, Mr. Mayo was adept at moving silently through the forest to avoid alarming the wildlife.
"I hid behind a tree and kept a watchful eye. Suddenly, I saw a man attack a woman, knocking her down. I initially thought that he intended to assault her, but he was trying to reach the child. I rushed over and hit him with a stick I had picked up just in case," Mr. Mayo explained. "Good job, Mr. Mayo. You've become a local hero. Look, the press is already gathering. They want to interview you. Sign this police report and bask in your newfound fame," said one of the officers. "No, I won't go to them. I don't care for that sort of thing," replied the gamekeeper, and quietly walked back to his place in a roundabout way, so that no one would follow. Mr. Mayo didn't feel he had done anything extraordinary. He believed anyone would have acted similarly in his position. How could he not assist when those who couldn't defend themselves were in danger? A few hours later, Kurt appeared at Mr. Mayo's house. "Hello, I am the father of the boy you rescued today. He's a good kid. He calmed down as soon as I picked him up. Such a brave and intelligent-looking boy." "Thank you so much. It's a blessing you were there at the time. We're so grateful you didn't just pass by." Kurt was on the verge of tears, overwhelmed with emotions. The day had been incredibly intense, leaving him emotionally shaken. "Tell me, how can I thank you?" "What are you talking? There's no need to thank me. Who keeps score when a child's life hangs in the balance?" Mr. Mayo was genuinely surprised to be thanked for his actions. "Nevertheless," Kurt persisted. "Well, if you insist, a new hunting suit and maybe some food for my dog would be appreciated." "Of course, no problem. By the way, if you don't mind me asking, was all this done for money?" asked a curious gamekeeper. "Oh, sadly it's much more complicated than that," replied Kurt. "Well, feel free to share if it's not too much trouble. I live somewhat isolated here, in an information vacuum, so to speak." Kurt began to recount the disjointed events of their past years, including Jolie's illness, their unconventional parenting decision, her subsequent death, and the ensuing revenge against her husband. "The investigator informed me that Nick was deeply hurt, as everyone assumed his actions were solely driven by greed. He was in fact consumed by revenge," Kurt explained. Kurt was relieved that Mr. Mayo had inquired about this complex story. He had been eager to share it with someone, seeking an unbiased perspective from an outsider. He questioned if they had driven Nick into a state of madness and revenge, and if it were just about himself, Kurt wouldn't suffer so much reflexivity, but everything he and Jolie did went back to their boy. After concluding his story, Kurt turned to Mr. Mayo, an impartial observer, and asked, "Do you think we pushed him to this point? Are we responsible for his entire desire for revenge?" "Oh boy, are you serious? You're an adult and you're talking such nonsense. That Nick of yours always found a reason. He doesn't even need one. He married for money, cheated shamelessly, mistreated his sick wife, and convinced himself it was all her fault. What's her fault? For retaliating once? For losing patience? For not enduring it? Oh, she hit the most painful thing for him, the wallet. On the contrary, well done. The woman has thought up such a plan and put it into practice." This harsh truth from a strange man's perspective truly uplifted Kurt. He deeply pondered every word Mr. Mayo had said. "Now, I also owe you for your good advice," Kurt smiled. In response, the gamekeeper merely waved his hand at him. They parted as friends, and Mr. Mayo promised to check in on the boy. "I heard somewhere that the Chinese have this belief, or wisdom, God knows what to call it, that if you save someone's life, you're responsible for that person forever. So don't worry about your Robert. I'll look after him here too," the gamekeeper said as a farewell. True to his word, he regularly visited Kurt's house and was always a welcome guest. In him, the boy found another loving family member. The court sentenced Nick to several years of imprisonment. During this lengthy period, everyone in the house managed to calm down and return to their usual quiet life. The family could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Mr. Chinland regularly visited and babysat the boy, diligently fulfilling the duties assigned to him by his goddaughter. Kurt met a single mum, whose daughter attends the same kindergarten group as Robert. The children get along well, and Kurt's parents hopes that this time their son's personal life will flourish, and Robert will have a loving stepmother and sister, perhaps even more than one sister. But of course, as Kurt promised Jolie, he will never allow Robert to forget his own mother. He always talks about her, showing the boy pictures and videos. He constantly reminds him that his mother loves him very much, and she is always with him, protecting and watching over him, even if he can't see her.
Mum, I'm driving right now, actually. You always nag the drivers who are rushing down the highway, distracted by their phones. And now you're distracting me yourself. Why am I speeding? Because I want to be on time. You raised me to be responsible. Mum, I'm not laughing. I'll call you Sunday night, okay? Hi to Dad. Bye, kisses. Finishing the call, Kevin couldn't hold back a wide smile. Mum, she doesn't change. It was from her that Kevin inherited the methodical persistence needed to achieve his goal. Thanks to all this, a country boy from the backwoods, who was born into the family of a timber processing plant driver and a village accountant, and had managed to turn into the owner of a large and quite successful wholesale company in the city. Having more or less confidently established himself in the city, he immediately began to persuade his parents to move in with him from their northern village. I'll buy you an apartment not far from me, so that, in case of emergency, I can help you quickly. I know you want to do what's best in your opinion, his father grinned, not without pride. But I've had my whole life here, Kevin. Neighbours, friends, fishing spots, hunting and mushrooming. All this is here. I'll find something to do here every day in my retirement. Can you imagine me in the city? I'm not used to theatres and museums. I'm not interested. There are no friends there, no one to go fishing or to the bathhouse with. I've never lived in an apartment and I don't want to start. I need my own house and my own yard to go out, and here's this wild forest. You've started to earn money. Soon you'll want to have a family, and you'll have a place to bring the kids on vacation. Your mum and I will be delighted to spend time with them. Mum, what about you? Kevin said enthusiastically, hoping his mother would like to move to the city. Kevin, we're quite happy with life in the north, although I miss you very much. I don't want to move out. I'm in the comfort zone here. We are rather young with your father, Kevin. We don't need much help. We manage on our own. When you have children, and you need my help with grandchildren, then maybe we'll move, if we get along with your wife. Kevin knew his mother too well. If she said no, then she could change her mind, but only after much independent thought. However, the man never lost hope of changing his parents' minds. When assertiveness, practicality, and a bit of luck allowed him to start his own business and gradually increase turnover, he purchased a small house in the green suburb near the city and brought his parents there for a visit. Look at this gorgeous place. Forest, big lake, fresh air. We will do the repairs in any style you choose, Kevin exclaimed. Kevin, do what you want with the house, it's yours. You'll probably bring a young mistress soon, and 2 mistresses cannot coexist in one house. It's very rare for them to get along comfortably. Bart and I are proud of you, and will gladly visit you, but we have our own house, his mum replied, unwavering like a small, sturdy rock. And so far, Kevin hadn't been able to persuade his parents to move to him. After talking to his mother on the phone, Kevin saw the gas station sign and decided to refuel. Getting out of the car, Kevin took in a breath of air, a mixture of gasoline and dried grass.
In 20 meters from the gas station, there was a bonfire burning at a safe distance, with several young guys warming up in front of it. A sharp, piercing voice interrupted Kevin's thoughts. "Let go of the dog, jerk!" Kevin saw a skinny, long-haired, red-haired girl in a short jacket, tight jeans and rubber boots. "It's not your business," came a lazy response to the sharp exclamation. The other guys laughed. Kevin became warier. He hadn't liked these kinds of boys since childhood. "Give me the dog," the girl demanded sharply. "We'll put your mutt on the grill and roast it, and we'll fry you too, but with a different recipe, if you don't stop bothering us," one of the guys said with annoyance. "Not very scary," the girl said, however with a slight fear. Suddenly, the big guy loosened his grip, and the dog jumped out of his arms. The girl immediately caught and hugged the shaggy, dirty dog by the neck. The guys moved threateningly towards the girl, and Kevin thought it was time for him to intervene. "Honey, you've talked to the guys and that's enough. We have to go." "Oh, right. Okay, guys, I gotta go," declared the sharp-witted girl, dramatically shaking her hair. She turned and walked confidently toward Kevin, who had been standing near his new fancy car. "Thank you," the girl said. "Where can I take you?" Kevin inquired almost indifferently, like the answering machine of a rescue service. The girl currently was no longer in danger of being victimized by hoodlums, and some reasonable detour could be made to take her home, but it was not at all curious to socialize with her. "Strangers should at least introduce themselves to each other firstly," she reminded him calmly. Kevin was surprised by her answer, and finally took a closer look at her. The girl wore a shabby and scruffy clothes. Each boot had at least 2 kilograms of clay. Wow, what a noble woman in poverty. "Pardon my terrible manners. My name is Kevin, and would you mind telling me where to take you so you don't get into any more trouble?" "My name is June, and I'm afraid there is no such place." The girl replied with a hint of sadness. "Look, just because you had a fight with Mum and Dad doesn't mean you have to make them worried about you. How old are you? And what happened to you?" "My parents won't track me down. I'm actually already 22, though I'm used to being often mistaken for a 16-year-old. I finished accounting school, as she advised. I was even going to look for a job in my major, like my mum said. But why didn't she ask me for my advice when she got married to that jerk she trusted more than me? She's a nurse, she works in shifts, and she is on call a lot. And her new husband, Tom, is a mechanic at a confectionery factory. He is always at home in the evenings, and then one day I warmed up dinner for us in the evening, and he first touched my shoulder, then my knee. Then he became even more insistent. He got angry with my refusal and warned me that if I didn't get smart, he'd find a way to kick me out of the house. I hesitated, but decided to tell my mum. She had the right to know who she lived with. But to my great shock, then she told me that I was selfish, that she had raised me with such difficulty, and now I was interfering with her happiness, for which she had waited so long, and saying nasty things about her loving husband. Maybe it would have ended there, but she asked Tom, and he immediately found what to answer. "I'm sorry, honey, I didn't want to upset you, but your daughter is deliberately provoking me. She's always hitting on me. Of course, it's not your fault she's grown up like this. You thought about how to provide for her. You worked hard. I have no complaints." And there, my mother believed him unconditionally. She called me names and demanded that I apologize to the offended Tom. So I packed my backpack with a couple of changes of underwear and documents and left. I also took my savings from my summer vacation job. Maybe it would have been reasonable to take something from Tom's wallet, but I couldn't. Otherwise, it would have looked like I was worse than him. "Do you have a destination, or do you just love wandering around out of principle and love of nature?" Kevin asked, catching himself in the thought that, for some reason, he believed this girl. "I'm a fool, of course, but not like that.
explained the girl. Of course I had a plan. I decided to go to the town where my father lives with his new family. We haven't talked for a long time, but I thought that he wouldn't refuse me shelter for the first time, at least for a fee, until I find a job in the city. But I was stupid again. I should have found out something beforehand, and I just came out of the blue. Of course, if I'd known my father's number, I would have called him. So I arrived. The house was there, but my father wasn't. He works on a shift in the far north. There was only his wife and the red-haired twin boys in the house. I showed her my documents, and she said she believed me. I look a lot like my father. She was calm, there was no hysterics. She told me that the house was her inheritance, and that there's no place for me here. She's not a charity case. So she advised me not to be a fool and go back to my mum. Well, she said all this more politely than I'm telling you right now, for brevity. I had nothing to say about that. She was right. She let me stay the night, and in the morning I went to the bus station. I was walking and I didn't know where I was going next, putting off the decision until I got to the station. And some freaks on a scooter drove by me at speed and snatched my backpack with my money, phone and documents from me. It was great luck that my passport was in my jacket pocket, the girl said, patting her pocket. What a story! And what am I supposed to do with you now? I can't just leave you here. By the way, did you bring your dog with you from home? No, it's Lucky. I gave her a sausage at the store. On the way to my father's house, she followed me and slept on the threshold. In the morning, she followed me. Oh, by the way, maybe you have any work for me? I'm fine with unskilled labour. I can clean and cook quite well. Would you start working right away? Kevin snorted. Why not? You really are a fool, June. Your mum was probably only concerned with your personal life and not your upbringing, if she didn't teach you not to get into cars with strangers. Thank you, Captain Obvious, the girl smiled. I wouldn't get in with just anyone. It's just that not many people care about anyone. I didn't expect anyone to stand up for me and Lucky. If someone helps me out and then listens to me, I think I can trust him. Logical? Kevin grinned. Are you hungry? I would eat a hamburger, June admitted. While June was eating her hamburger, Kevin was thinking about what kind of job to offer her. For the past months, he had been seriously considering hiring a live-in housekeeper and settling her in the empty guest house. Most likely as an accountant, this college graduate from the countryside was out of the question. But as an au pair, she seemed quite capable. Kevin had very little faith that the candidates recommended by the recruitment agency would be considerably better. Just keep in mind that this will be my first job, not counting handing out flyers, June said. This is not to say that I expect any understanding or leniency, but I need everything explained in detail. Daily tasks, weekly duties, and any little things for your convenience, so that I don't have to ask unnecessary questions. The more detailed the instructions, the better the result will be. You are a sensible girl at times, Kevin snorted. It had been 2 months since June had been living and working at Kevin's house. So far, the man seems content with everything. Okay, good, he would say with a smile when returning from the office. June also called her best friend Peggy and told her where she was and what had happened to her. Well, at least your boss doesn't yell and demand the impossible. You're lucky to have such a reasonable employer, said Peggy, happy for her friend. Then, at June's request, she went to her mother and heard from her that she had no intention of searching for her daughter or verifying her whereabouts. June quietly cried for most of the night, burying her face in the shaggy fur of Lucky. She understood that she was not a priority for her mother, but it was one thing to feel and another to get confirmation. However, Kevin strongly advised June to inform her mother about her whereabouts. After all, a mother is a mother. She's not a monster, right? She'll certainly start looking for you soon. She'll start worrying, and she might even file a missing person report. Meanwhile, June got accustomed to her new job and housing. She was only afraid of Kevin's guests, but they were rare, and when they did visit,
They mostly talked about business and behaved as if they were in a business meeting. She even started to worry, did he have real friends? Not just the smiling, polished or cautious business partners, but real friends who would have ordinary conversations. And then one Friday, Kevin returned home much later than he used to, at 3 a.m. However, he wasn't alone. A graceful, well-groomed brunette with coral fingernails on her long, slender fingers stepped out of his car. I should have quietly gone to bed after finishing my tasks, instead of waiting for him like a fool. June scolded herself for her miscalculation and for being unpleasantly surprised by the appearance of this beautiful girl. This should have been indifferent to her. Unusually, when there were important visitors, Kevin would call in advance and provide specific instructions. However, this guest was completely unexpected. The girl didn't respond to June's greeting and gave her an indifferent glance as if she were furniture. Well, that's fine, June thought, interpreting it as a permission to act the same way. She snorted contentedly and disappeared into the guest house, knowing that no one would bother her until morning. However, her plans were interrupted by an unexpectedly ringing phone. June didn't want to answer it, but it kept insisting. "June!" Kevin's deputy exhaled with gladness. "Thank God it's you. Are you at home or near your boss? Sorry for the stupid question at this time of day. His phone is disconnected, but I urgently need to reach him out." "Frankly speaking, I'm in my room." "June, I know I don't have the right to ask anything, especially after nightfall, but it's essential. I'm sorry, but there's a problem with the paperwork for the last big shipment of dried snacks. We just found out during the overnight shipment. We need to do something about it. Please, go to the main house and hand the cell phone to your boss. Can you do that?" "Okay, call me back in 5 minutes." June quickly put on a long robe that reached down to her heels, slipped her feet into sports boots, and quietly went out of the guest house. She purposely stomped loudly on the stairs leading to the second floor, where the master and guest bedrooms were located, so that Kevin and his girlfriend would hear her. However, they didn't hear her. There was a heated conversation taking place outside the door, quite loud for this time of night. "Where did you see caprice, Kevin? It's a reasonable request from a girl with a sense of dignity. I'm not a prude, and I understand perfectly men's physiological needs. I've already made sure of that. Okay, if you're so conscientious and socially responsible that you can't fire her on the spot, write her an excellent reference and pay for a VIP package to help her find a job through a staffing agency. It's nothing personal, but I would like her to sleep with anyone's husband or boyfriend, just not mine." "Priscilla, no one has ever complained that I'm not clear about my position." Kevin's calm, tired voice could be heard. "I have no desire to offend you or June, and I have never had a thought about sleeping with her. I really don't understand why you are so jealous." The arguing didn't continue as June's phone started ringing in her robe pocket. The girl finally realized she was frozen like a statue in front of the bedroom, started pounding on the door with her fist. "I apologize for interrupting, but your deputy is calling about an urgent matter." Kevin opened the door and June handed the cell phone to Kevin. Without waiting for any comments, she turned and walked back. Peggy was right. Everything is going suspiciously well. It won't last long. You shouldn't get used to a good thing, so it won't be as frustrating when it's over, June thought on her way back. In the morning at 8 o'clock, she got out of bed and made coffee on a small gas stove. Sitting at a narrow table with a cup in hand, she looked around for her phone to dial Peggy's number. It was then that she remembered where her phone was. "I'm getting crazy," June complained to Lucky, who was lying at her feet with an indifferent expression. The girl found comfort in short conversations with her dog. There was no unnecessary chatter, just the essence of the question, and she could imagine the dog's responses. "Just don't get too carried away with this kind of therapy," Peggy advised half seriously. "Try making some acquaintances among the people there." No sooner had June sat down next to Lucky to think over the next steps in her life, burying her hands in the dog's withers. Then the doorbell rang. "Come in, it's open," June replied, trying to sound calm. Kevin entered, placing her cell phone on the table. "Here, I'm returning it. My deputy and I inconvenienced you. It rarely happens, but sometimes it does. My phone ran out of battery at the worst possible time. Sorry." "I'm sorry too," June heard in her own voice. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop on your conversation. I was just confused when I realized it was about me. I'll leave without any problems. Don't keep me here out of pity. You've been a great help. I won't be lost. There are people in much worse situations." "I don't know what you've made up in your mind, June, but I don't want to get into it." Kevin waved away tiredly and even grimly. "Forget everything Priscilla has said. I just thought that I found someone for a serious relationship, but it turned out that I was mistaken. As for you, you just keep working hard and diligently." Kevin had a habit of twirling different objects in his hands, a phone, a glass, or a pen. He did it when he was thinking about something. Now he picked up a thin sketchbook from June's dining room table. The man opened it, flipped through it, and became animated. "Wow, you know how to draw, but you never mentioned it." "You never asked about my hobbies," June said, the first thing that came to mind. "Lucky is like a living thing. Oh, and I only look this good after a vacation, when I'm disconnected from everything on the beach in the Dominican Republic. You've only seen my chief accountant once, but you've painted her like you've known her all your life. Listen, you have a talent. I'm not kidding." For the first time in her life, June wished the earth could swallow her up. She could handle criticism and complaints decently, but she was not accustomed to praise, and felt lost, as if on an alien planet. Kevin's everyday voice brought her back to earth from her thoughts. "I'm going to the central warehouse and then to the office. My guest has already left by cab. Don't worry, it's unlikely you'll see each other again. Bye, see you tonight." He nodded and left. Lucky immediately took a deep breath, and June exhaled loudly and surprised herself with a feeling of joy. The arrogant beauty Priscilla had imagined that she had found someone who could be easily manipulated. Instead, she would have to start a new search. Kevin had hardly ever wondered about his personal life until recently. It didn't seem important at all. There was always more important things to do, requiring full immersion and complete dedication. So he didn't have enough resources for a full-fledged relationship. Of course, Kevin had resort romances, but none of them were pleasant enough to continue once the vacation relaxation ended. However, the man was content with his own way of life, except for the fact that his parents believed he was living wrongly and constantly reminded him of it. Even his mother, who used to understand him completely, went from being unreservedly proud of her son's accomplishments to suddenly declaring that all this is not as valuable when there is no one to share it with. "Mum, what about you and Dad? You have a new house and 2 cars, and you've started to see the world. I look at you, and I'm happy that I've been able to give you a comfortable life." "It's all great, Kevin. We're proud and we enjoy it, but we could have done without it. But seeing you happy is the most important thing for your father and me." "But Mum, do I look unhappy? I know what I'm doing, and I love my life. I have my parents' house to come back to. I have a close friend, Alex, and I don't need more. You know me. I just haven't met the person I want to see every day. I am not going to get married just because it's the right time, especially since people don't get married as early as they used to 30 years ago." "Yes, I understand," the mother sighed, feigning doomed sadness. Or rather, it was easier for Kevin to think that she was acting. One day, he accidentally overheard his parents talking and realized that they were seriously worried. "But I'm starting to think that Kevin still remembers Annie, and that's why he can't find anyone. Do you remember my Uncle Ben? He died as a childless bachelor. When he was young, he had his advantages, but as he grew older, he became so dreary. What if Kevin ends up like him? Rose, you'll come up with your own cause for alarm, and you've brought Uncle Ben into it. Kevin is nothing like him. He hasn't thought about Annie for a long time. He's making money now. He just needs several more years. It's normal for men. Look at what he's accomplished while setting up his business. After a while, he'll be ready for a family. So please, stop worrying. Kevin felt guilty, making his mother worry even though he didn't want to. But his father was right. He hadn't thought about Annie for a couple of years. She had faded into oblivion. Annie was his childhood friend and classmate. She was graceful, very quiet, with soft flaxen hair and big blue eyes, a princess from a fairy tale. Kevin was an excellent student, an athlete and a recognized leader in the class. That day his roommate got the flu, and the newcomer Annie was seated next to Kevin. From that day on, they became friends and soon were seen as an inseparable couple. Sometimes girls, beautiful in childhood, grow up to be ordinary, but Annie was not one of them. She grew up to be a real beauty. None of the girls even challenged her superiority. It was considered a futile endeavour. After graduating from school, Annie showed little interest in further studies. She always achieved average grades and had no big career ambitions. Eventually she enrolled in a hairdressing course close to home. Kevin went to the city and immediately enrolled in college, and at a family gathering he declared that he would complete his studies, find a job and then marry Annie. Annie's mother worried that Kevin might find someone else in the city. She frequently visited with Kevin's parents to keep up with his life. Beauty is beauty, but there's always someone even more attractive. The college is probably full of girls who grew up in urban families, going to theatres and museums. Kevin might find them more interesting, the woman believed, voicing her concerns to her daughter. But never mind, as long as you show that you're loyal and decent. That's rare nowadays, especially with your looks. He'll marry someone like you. Kevin will achieve a lot in life. There's no need to consult a fortune teller. He'll dress you up and show you the world. When they're young, girls foolishly let good guys slip away. They think there will be plenty more, but in reality, there won't be. The mother taught her daughter. Annie waited for Kevin faithfully, as if she had no interest in other guys at all. Kevin's father was happy for his son, and once said to his wife, "Annie is a decent girl." But Rose wasn't so certain about that. "You know, Bart, if she behaved the same way in a big city, it would be great. But here, there's no one to choose from. The guys who want to succeed in life leave. And my future daughter-in-law doesn't need to look for anyone else. She already has a responsible Kevin." "Looks like you'll be a difficult mother-in-law." Bart raised his eyebrows with a sly smile. "I'll be good, and anyone who doubts that will find out," retorted Rose, playfully threatening him with her fist and laughing. During the first 2 years of his studies, Kevin would always come home for vacations, but on weekends and short holidays, Annie would go to see him in the city whenever possible. These trips were interesting from the start, but they became even more interesting after a year and a half, when Kevin started making friends and acquaintances in the city. The young man had a friend named Lucas, who knew the city inside out, as 3 generations of his family had lived there. Although his father had recently been transferred to an important position in the capital, Lucas and his mother chose to stay in the city until Lucas finished his studies. Annie quickly noticed that although Kevin was quick to grasp ideas and was often even more successful than his best friend, he still had much fewer opportunities than Lucas. Yes, Lucas had no pressing problems at all. His father and his new position in the capital offered him numerous prospects, and to Annie's great surprise, he didn't have a permanent girlfriend. Lucas himself revealed this at his birthday party, when he took Annie to a stylish library in his father's study. "Yes, don't look at me like this. I swear I don't have a girlfriend. But what if she's you?" Annie didn't hesitate for long, and soon they got married and left for the capital. The wedding was beautiful, followed by a honeymoon to Samui and Phuket. The beach photos were stylish and beautiful, taken by a talented and expensive photographer. In all the photos, Lucas had a broad, self-satisfied and triumphant smile, while Annie portrayed a gentle fairy. "Rose, I'm sorry that we won't be related, but we'll remain friends, won't we?" Annie's mother said meekly, stepping over the threshold of the Bravermans' house. "Come in, why put on a show for the neighbours?" Rose said. Annie's mother, carefully but with poorly concealed pride, handed her friend the photos. "Here, the kids sent them from Thai, and I decided to print them out for the album." Beautiful couple," Rose said almost indifferently, without mockery, as she glanced at the beautiful pictures. A crown prince and a glamorous pussycat. "Well, what do you want to hear from me? I'm glad everything happened now, that my son and your daughter didn't have an opportunity to get married and have a baby." As for Kevin, he did not say a bad word about the failed bride, and did not let others talk to him about her. He just quickly digested it all and never made any more relationships. Not out of principle or on purpose. It just happened that an invisible armour had grown around him. He didn't make friends either, only useful business acquaintances. His only friend was his classmate Alex, a bookworm, part-time snowboarder and mountaineer, an extreme sports enthusiast. And now Kevin said goodbye to Priscilla. He had been dating her for 6 months. Of course he had seen before that Priscilla was too capricious and liked money, but her last jealousy just finally put an end to the possibility of continuing their relationship. Nearly 6 months had passed. April arrived, and spring was already palpable in the coastal hills. June and Lucky discovered that there was a lot of dog lovers in the neighbourhood, and Lucky, a big and shaggy dog, played happily with expensive dogs, which were prize winners and participants in various exhibitions. Each of the nearest neighbours, whom Kevin did not know before because there was simply no time to get acquainted, now had a pencil portrait over the fireplace or in a cosy corner of the bedroom. Some photos showed a dog and children, others showed a dog with his wife and children, and still others showed a dog with his owner in his office against a bookshelf or a fireplace. One day Kevin invited an art expert to visit him. After looking at June's work, he approved with restraint. "Fresh, original. Where did you study?" "Accounting school." "It happens," the art expert said with a light smile. "But now, it's time to study for your vocation." After giving her detailed recommendations, the expert and Kevin went to the library, while June went to her guest house, sat on the sofa, and suddenly cried silently. If only her mother could hear what the gallery owner had said. June's memory brought back in detail the conversation she had with her mum before her high school graduation. "June, I will repeat it once again, and I won't say it again. While I provide for you and clothe you, I will decide where you should go." "That's not fair. This is my life, and I don't want to end up with an unloved job like you." "My work allowed me to raise you, so don't be disrespectful. You all think you're smarter than your mothers at your age. Don't give me that look, as if I'm a terrible mother. If you had a wealthy father who would provide for you, everything would be different. Trust me, you need a profession that will always provide for you. Accountants are in demand everywhere. They start earning good money fairly quickly. They don't have night shifts or complain about elderly patients. My classmate manages several small firms remotely. It's a nice thing, having a cat on your lap and not dealing with annoying, bossy faces. And the artist's work is just too unstable. While an accountant, even an average one, will find a stable job. If you are lucky enough to marry a rich man, then do what you want, if your husband agrees to provide for you. Until then, it will be just like I said." Just before Christmas Eve, June gathered the courage to call her mum. "Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Mummy. I wish you happiness and good health. Are you at home for New Year's Eve? Not on duty?" "Thank you, June. Happy New Year. Tom and I have guests here. It's not very convenient to talk right now. Let's talk again the day after tomorrow, okay? Okay, it's my permanent number, agreed June, knowing she wouldn't actually call back the day after tomorrow. After the holidays, June kept working, took regular painting and drawing lessons on weekends, and thought very little about other aspects of her life. But on the first warm day, when it became clear that winter would not return, Kevin said to June, finishing his breakfast, "You've been working for me for more than half a year. You already may have 2 weeks vacation. Go on a painting trip, for example. Think about when you want to go on vacation, and we'll agree tomorrow." Kevin said that and left. It's easy for him to talk about vacation. June had no idea where it would be better to go, so that it would be enough for the money she had saved for the winter. She had never been anywhere further than her hometown, not counting the school excursion to the capital after 9th grade, but she always wanted to travel. When she dared to dream and imagine that her life was going well, such dreams included travelling. The girl decided to honestly confess to her boss that she needed advice. But the next day, Kevin came home unexpectedly early, at 6 in the evening. "June, we need to talk. Will you understand if your vacation has to be postponed a little?" "Absolutely, no problem at all," June admitted. "I didn't even know that I was entitled to it if you hadn't suggested it." "I must somehow eliminate your legal illiteracy," Kevin said tiredly. "But that's later. I need your help now. My parents are coming over." "Do you want them to be comfortable while they are here?" June asked. "Don't be so tense," the boss advised her good-natured. "My parents are ordinary people from the provinces, without any pretentiousness. My father has a heart problem, and it turns out that there were signs before, but he didn't tell anyone, thinking it would resolve on its own, but it didn't. They've been recommended a good specialist here. I'll arrange it, and my father also needs positive emotions. Who knows how much time he has left? It's scary to say, but with his diagnosis, it's better not to deceive ourselves. My request may seem strange and absurd to you. You can refuse. I understand my mum and dad really want me to get married. Mum is already openly pushing me. Dad is more about male solidarity, but he's been worried too, according to Mum. If you agree to go along with it, I'll introduce you to them as my bride. They'll be so happy that it'll help them through life's difficulties. It will make things easier. Please don't refuse right away. Think about it. It's important to me. I would never ask for anything beyond your official duties if it weren't for matters like this." Kevin was tense and silently expectant. June realised it was her turn to answer without hesitation. "I understand the idea, lying to save the day, all of it. But what do we do next? You and I can pretend to be bride and groom, and your father will be happy. But later, we need to create a separation, even if it's a peaceful one. Your father will be even more upset after having such hopes, and it's not good for him." "June, I'm used to dealing with problems as they come. As they say, let's cross that bridge when we come to it. We can plan the strategy later, as the situation progresses. Right now, it's important for me to give my father and mother the strength to carry on with his problem. What about the second objection?" "Okay, but my second objection is that I'm not a suitable candidate. You're a wealthy man, and I don't fit to be a wealthy man's bride. Your parents probably imagine a girl from a so-called good family, if not a businesswoman. Your mother will understand this." Kevin's eyebrows raised in surprise, and for the first time during this heavy evening, he smiled, confused. "What a maze of psychology! I like your thoughtful approach to the task, and now I have more confidence that you'll do well, and my parents will really like you." "Well, there are actresses, aren't there?" June played her last trump card. "Not all stars are highly paid. Many actors need roles, and they can play Jacqueline Kennedy if they have to, so you could hire one of them." My parents would be scared of Jacqueline Kennedy, though," Kevin objected warily. They would love a girl like you. I won't even explain why. I don't care about that now. You don't need to pretend. Just be yourself. But don't forget that we have a relationship. I promise not to get too carried away with the act and become overly affectionate. The most I'll allow myself is to hold your hand, especially since my parents are a bit old-fashioned and don't approve of public displays of affection. Please, help me out? Okay. All right, I'll try to do my best, June said, immediately regretting her words and feeling as if she had jumped into the water from a high swinging suspension bridge. But you have to tell me more about your parents and childhood. Show me photos. Because it's strange when a groom doesn't share information about his family with his bride. The more I know, the better chance I have of playing the part successfully. When are your parents coming? They will arrive the night after tomorrow. We will meet them and then go to dinner to get acquainted, celebrate the meeting, and make plans. My parents will be here for a week, and you'll be staying with me the whole time. We'll have to adjust our routine, get more sleep, and don't grab the vacuum cleaner or any of the other usual household tools. Think of it as the start of a vacation. The dinner at the restaurant was wonderful. June realised that she had been worrying for no reason. Or maybe not for no reason. But seeing her excitement, which she couldn't hide, Kevin's parents started doing everything they could to make things easier for her. June, I'm pleased to meet you, Rose said quietly in the cosy restaurant while the men were choosing wine. And I perfectly understand your excitement right now. Many years ago, I trembled with fear before the first meeting with my future mother-in-law. Bart was very attentive to his mother, and I wanted to make a good impression so she would approve of me. Of course, out of fear, I forgot everything and ended up looking like a complete fool. She probably even doubted that I was capable of studying to be an accountant. It's funny to remember now. I too studied to be an accountant, June suddenly wanted to share. But I can hardly bring myself to work in this field. It's just not my thing. I gave in to my mum's insistence. Disliking your work can spoil a woman's character, said Kevin's mother. I enjoy accounting, otherwise I would have quit it long ago, no matter what anyone said. Kevin told us on the phone that you paint and that you have a natural talent. He even sent some pictures of your job to us. Such vivid dogs, cats and children. And when I saw Kevin's portrait, all the anxiety in my heart disappeared. Well, he's finally lucky. He's not being deceived. It's obvious that you love my son. I'm not an art historian, but you can only paint like this with love. It's not just talent. Sorry if I embarrassed you. June blushed to the roots of her hair and was glad that Kevin and his father were busy choosing wine and hadn't heard what Rose had said. Of course, she tried to prevent herself from thinking about it. She blocked out any suspicious thoughts, but she loved him. She already had several dozen portraits of Kevin. To be exact, 48 works. They were painted in different seasons, moods and settings, all painted from memory, all safely stored at the very bottom of her linen drawer so that her boss wouldn't see what he shouldn't. She was certain that even when she left his house for good, she would continue this series of portraits for a long, long time. But they would never appear at her exhibitions, always remaining at her desk. And she would definitely paint today's portrait. Kevin would speak with his father, and they looked so similar and yet different, but both handsome and happy. On a small dance floor in front of the restaurant fireplace, a very interesting couple was slow dancing. A sturdy and dignified grey-haired man moved with little dexterity, clearly not accustomed to dancing in his life, but he radiated calm contentment and was not at all embarrassed by his lack of skill. His partner was a thin, red-haired girl in a delicate turquoise dress. She seemed a bit bewildered, with a slightly sad smile and yet happy eyes. "Don't be too harsh with her, Kevin." Rose took a moment to talk to her son while the couple was dancing, and they were alone at the table.
She's so vulnerable and much younger than you. You're taking on such responsibility. Don't let her down. I really like June. She's such a girl. How should I put it? Sophisticated? Kevin suddenly suggested it, pleased with the word he had found. It was indeed true. He simply hadn't had time to fully comprehend what he had noticed long ago. "Hello, Kevin," a familiar low velvet voice murmured behind him. Hi, Mum. I'm going out for 5 minutes to talk to someone. You won't miss me." Then he quickly nodded to Priscilla and almost forcibly took her away before her mother could realize it. "I'm having dinner with a friend. I see you're in interesting company. You could have introduced me to your mother." Priscilla spoke with a gentle sneer as soon as they stepped out into the open veranda. "I wouldn't say anything bad about you to her, only good things. I don't understand why you're so nervous. You've always been so calm in the past. Did being involved with a young housekeeper wear you out so much? By the way, did you get fed up with her and decide to give her to your daddy? She will please him, of course, but at his age he must be careful. Think of his health." "The purpose of all that you said?" Trying to appear calm, Kevin exhaled stiffly. "We girls sometimes act aimlessly." The carefree, ringing voice of the quietly approaching mother echoed instead of Priscilla's. "Your friend is just hurt. Very hurt. Right, honey? I think it's disrespectful to the parents to make them spend the evening in the company of their son's housekeeper. You have to separate those aspects of your life somehow. That's what I wanted to say to Kevin as my old friend." "What you said I heard perfectly well. Just think of it. A housekeeper." The mother theatrically rounded her eyes, which were on fire with joyful excitement. "It's just a shame and an indelible disgrace for our noble family to sit at the same table with her. Well, I don't know in what wilderness you were brought up, but it seems nowhere, and no one has long been surprised that people get acquainted at work, and sometimes girls marry their bosses. I'm determined to have a good evening, and I don't intend to hear nasty things about my future daughter-in-law." "Have a nice evening," Priscilla politely sang to her mother, and she hurriedly disappeared into the semi-darkness of the hall without showing her emotions. "What a smug woman!" Rose snorted angrily. "And you're good, too. What do you take me and your father for? Did you think we'd be against a daughter-in-law who had worked for you as an au pair? There are thousands of girls who take that job while they're still in school. Waitresses, hotel maids, yes, half of them are students. To avoid embarrassing June, I'll keep quiet for now. She's already excited, poor girl. So, let's go to them." The family returned home late. "Thank you, my dear, for the wonderful evening, but now we need to rest." "Good night, darlings," said Rose, hugged her son and June, and went to their bedroom. June and Kevin were left alone. The girl tried to appear calm and judicious. "Am I doing everything right so far?" she asked quietly. "It's gone wonderfully well," Kevin assured her in a strangely warm voice. "Only thanks to your parents. They're so easy to deal with. June, I'm going to ask you something. If I don't say it, I might miss an essential chance. I don't usually do that. Let's really be together? It's not for fun. No, not out of boredom. Not for my parents. What do you say to that?" "Come with me," June said quietly. "I'll show you 48 of your portraits. I'll even give you one as a present. Whichever one you like."